It's Sunday morning. Not to say that it was anything special, just an ordinary day off. But what makes this morning interesting for this story is the fact that I am lying in bed next to my sleeping wife, pleasuring myself while I imagine her pleasuring another man. It's probably worth explaining. This is not a common situation for most families, and I want you to understand how I ended up in this situation. My wife and I, who are in our early 40s, have been happily married for 12 years. Both of our first marriages ended due to our spouse's infidelity, which led to several years of mistrust and conflict that we were able to successfully overcome. We trust each other completely. This is the most important thing I want to convey, because without this trust, further history would be impossible. We got rid of jealousy a long time ago, stopped checking each other's phones and pages on social networks, and are sure that we will never cheat on each other. This trust and unconditional love allows us to explore our fantasies without fear of judgment. She told me about her fantasies involving forced sex, a threesome with two men, sex in front of someone. I shared with her my thoughts about submission and the desire to try sex toys, which surprised her, but she took it with understanding. I never shared fantasies about seeing her with another man. To be honest, I myself did not know about the existence of this fantasy until recently. Basically, our fantasies remain fantasies. We discuss them or flirt with each other about them to warm up our own sexual encounters. You probably need to know a little more about us. My wife, Jane, is a stunning Latina with gorgeous DD breasts and shapely hips that give her figure the perfect curves. Brad am also attractive, tall, and athletic. And although I don't have a huge size in my pants, my 7 inches are perfect for my wife, believe me. Our sex life is active and fun, and overall we are happy with what we have. None of us are left unsatisfied. I admit that I have a wilder imagination in sexual terms. I hope this short introduction gives you some insight into us. Two happy individuals with an active sex life, a vibrant imagination and mutual trust. Respect and love. Rarity, right? But again, it's important to the story. So how, you ask, did I end up in a situation where I satisfy myself next to my wife, imagining her with another man? To explain, I'll have to tell a longer story. I'll start from the beginning, but not too far. We only need to go back to yesterday, Saturday morning. Darling, don't forget that we're having a party at the Davises tonight. Jane's wife shouted to me from across the apartment. I threw my head back, sighing with obvious displeasure. I honestly forgot about the party and had already mentally planned out my day, from which it conveniently fell out. Oh right, I answered with noticeable reluctance. I'm not the most sociable person when it comes to events. It's not that I'm antisocial, I just don't always want to go out and socialize in large groups. I don't have many friends, but I have a lot of acquaintances. Usually people are not included in my circle of loved ones, but at the same time, I am friendly, enough that they never stop inviting us. My wife, on the other hand, is the life of the party. She easily gets involved in most conversations and is often the center of attention. She loves to gossip with her neighbors, and I hate to admit it, but she is probably in the fantasies of many of these neighbors' husbands. All this leads to the fact that we are often invited to parties, which I am much less enthusiastic about than my wife. Who will be there? I asked, hoping it wouldn't be the full range of the usual suspects. Jane crossed the room and thinking answered, the Davises, of course, Cheryl and Mike, the Caldwells, I think the Robinsons rose from work. Apparently the expression on my face spoke for itself, because she stopped and smiled. These were all ordinary faces. Come on, dear, you always like it at such parties, my wife tried to encourage me. I knew she was right, but I still answered a little embarrassed. Well, you're the reason we're invited. Always in the spotlight. With a smile and a reassuring hug, she added, don't worry, dear, the girls in the neighborhood are talking about you too. But what can I do if I'm a little more outgoing? I shrugged, knowing she was right, but not wanting to give up right away. Will Jose be there? I teased her with a hint in my voice. I knew my wife had a little crush on Jose, and I don't blame her for it. He's a good-looking guy, and if the rumors are true, he's also well-equipped. He lost his wife to cancer several years ago, and has not yet found anyone new, but he often appears at such events, being in the same social circle as my wife. He's a great guy, don't get me wrong, and I find her attraction to him funny. The wife tilted her head to the side with a feigned offended look. Oh dear, are you jealous? No, my love, never. I trust you. I'm just wondering how often you meet at such parties and what you talk about. He's cute, I'm confident enough to admit it. And if the rumors are true, he has much more there than I do. She turned to me, throwing that same passionate look that made my heart skip a beat. Pressing herself close to me, she playfully squeezed my groin. He may be cute, but you and this are all I need, she said with a smile, kissed me lightly, and taking a step away, added with a grin. Now let's quickly get ready, otherwise I'll have to punish you. Inserting something into your tight ass. God, my wife says such exciting things. I won't bore you with the random details of the party itself. If you've ever been to a house party on your block, it went pretty much the same way. People discussed children, work, their illnesses, everything as usual. I chatted with the guys a bit about the local team and why they've been playing poorly. This season again, typical guy talk. In general, everything was quite ordinary and predictable, until I noticed that every time I looked up at my wife, Jose was always somewhere nearby. In Jose's defense, my wife looked especially attractive that day. She put on a blouse that made her already amazing breasts even more seductive. The high heels accentuated her legs, and the short shorts hugged her curvy hips perfectly. She looked amazing, and men couldn't help but glance her way. It's not that these men's wives are any less attractive. It's just that my wife has some kind of knack for standing out in a crowd. But I digress. I began to pay closer attention to what my wife was doing, to see if it seemed to me that Jose was flirting with her much more than usual. He was always quite social with her at parties, but this time it seemed more focused. A light touch on her thigh here, a hand on the small of her back there, leaning closer to whisper something in her ear. He was clearly courting her, and my wife was responding to him. She let his hand linger a little longer, laughing at something he said with a flirtatious smile at just the right moments. And it was at that moment that something strange happened to me, that changed my perception of the situation. I imagine many men would be angry at this turn of events, and perhaps they would be right. But as I said, my relationship with my wife is excellent, and I knew that it was not about us. She just liked getting attention. It was as if something switched in me, and I realized how much what I was watching turned me on. I felt myself getting more and more excited as I imagined him whispering secret sexual thoughts to her. The more I imagined, the stronger my excitement became. For the rest of the party, I would periodically approach my wife to chat a little, and then find an excuse to leave her alone to see if Jose would get her attention again. And every time I walked away, he actually approached her to continue the conversation. I knew my wife's body language very well and could see that Jose's attention turned. I had images in my head of her sneaking off to a secluded corner to kiss him. I imagined him grabbing her breasts and her kneeling in front of him. These thoughts were driving me crazy. I was so aroused by my wife being in these situations that I almost had to find a private place to release the tension. I had absolutely no time for communication. My excitement was so great that it was difficult to hide it, and my thoughts were not at all about the party. I would go to a quiet place and watch my wife being admired by a handsome guy with presumably a lot of dignity. This fact turned me on even more, the thought that she had a chance with someone who was bigger than me. I don't know where these thoughts came from, but at that moment I was completely absorbed in what was happening, and it made me love my wife even more. The party ended later than usual, and as always, we were one of the last to leave. My wife and I were tired, and on the way home we had a short conversation about the previous evening. "You were quieter than usual today, dear," my wife remarked. "I wasn't really in the mood for communication, dear. I was more watching you," I answered. She looked at me with bewilderment. "What do you mean?" "It seemed to me that Jose paid special attention to you today," I said, without feeling the least bit irritated. "Stop it, dear. You know it's harmless," she answered, not very convincingly. I felt like I was on target, but I didn't want to push too hard. "Don't worry, my love. I'm not jealous. To be honest, I even thought it was a little exciting to see the way he looked at you today," I ventured to admit. She didn't react to this at first. She just sat there thoughtfully, biting her lower lip. Finally, she replied, "Yes, I think he was a little more slick than usual. But why did you find it hot?" I shrugged. I liked seeing you as the object of his attention. It was clear that he wanted you. I know you won't leave me, so I liked seeing the effect on him and you. The last part added a mischievous smile in her direction. Well, you are the man I want or need, she finished, again not very convincingly. As you wish, my love concluded our conversation. After we got home, nothing more was said on the subject. But suffice to say, my mind was running a mile a minute. I don't know how long I slept, thinking about my wife and Jose in a variety of carnal positions. The more I dreamed about it that night, the more I wanted it. Sunday morning, and so we returned to me. I lie in bed next to my sleeping wife, feeling a growing excitement. This was not something new for us. Sometimes such moments came, especially when my wife had her period, and during such periods, I tried to avoid any intimate contact so as not to cause her unnecessary discomfort. On such mornings, I managed on my own. Sometimes my wife just watched, lightly touching my body, sometimes even helping me a little. Today, however, the situation was somewhat different. My wife did not have her period, but despite this, the desire was still too strong. I lay there and tried to act carefully so as not to wake her. Gradually removing the blanket from myself, I began to move, trying to suppress the noise, and monitor my breathing so as not to disturb her sleep. However, at some point I felt my wife move slightly, and while holding my breath, I felt her soft touch on my chest. Her touch was indistinct, as if she was between sleep and wakefulness, but it already gave me a certain feeling of closeness and support. This, of course, gave me some extra confidence, and I felt that maybe I could carry on and enjoy this moment. I began to speak quietly, expressing my thoughts in a whisper, the words coming out without much control, simply reflecting my emotions and fantasies. My wife woke up, but did nothing to stop me. She just watched quietly, seemingly with interest and acceptance. Her fingers found my chest, gently pinching the skin, which added a special piquancy to the moment. It was something special for us, without words, but with a feeling that she was nearby and supporting me. Her participation was quite delicate, but that's exactly what I wanted. I whispered words, expressing my fantasies, until the feeling of liberation completely overwhelmed me. The moments were so intense that it felt like the whole world stopped for a split second to let me experience that moment. It was an incredible feeling of liberation and relief that completely overwhelmed me. After it was all over, I felt incredibly tired, as if all my strength had been spent. I collapsed on the bed, breathing heavily, trying to return to reality and regain my breath. My wife was next to me, her fingers slid over my chest. She looked at me with warmth and, it seems, a little surprised. She smiled and quietly asked, "Where the hell did that come from?" Finally, I turned to her and said, "I've been thinking about this since yesterday, watching you and Jose. The more he touched you, the more my thoughts went to very unpleasant places. My dreams last night were much more intense. The thought of you with him turns me on so much." She looked at me thoughtfully for a moment before asking, "When did this start?" "Honestly, just yesterday. Look, love, I trust you unconditionally, and I know that you would never leave me for him. So I guess this is just letting my mind go where it wants to go. And damn, he really wanted it." She fell silent again, thinking, I don't know, love, our fantasies have never become so concrete. We always talked about such things, but most of our fantasies concern only us and not third parties. I agreed, I know love, but I think we are in a place where we know who we are and we know we would never do anything to hurt another. You're stuck with me. Besides, you mean you never thought about it? She smiled at those last comments. I don't know, baby, I like what we have. I don't want to ruin it. I reached out and ran my hand down her leg, and as I suspected, she was horny. Home, just as I thought, he said with a smile, lightly touching her hand, and she felt the familiar warmth from this touch. There had long been something between them that they could only grasp on an intuitive level, an invisible but inextricable thread that they themselves had been weaving for years, accumulating feelings and impressions. She adored her touch, her laughter, that unique look that she could only give to him. She looked at him with a smile, not trying to hide the pleasure that he knew her so well, and understood her thoughts. Her voice sounded with a playful note. Unfair, she said, lowering her gaze and adding a slight hint of reproach, while her lips betrayed her inner desire to laugh. Admit it, my love. You still like the thought of you and Jose, he continued, watching her reaction, tilting his head slightly, as if he wanted to catch the slightest movement of her face in order to understand what was on her mind. He knew her so well that it seemed as if he could read her thoughts. These conversations were a kind of game between them, a game full of trust and mutual understanding. "I love you, baby," she replied, trying to resist, as if her own thoughts and feelings were a challenge to her. She seemed to be trying to hold on, but she knew that trusting her husband was the most natural thing for her. Her voice was soft and loving. He smiled back, and there was more warmth in his gaze than ever. He realized that this was her confession, her way of showing that she was with him, no matter what. "And I love you, which is why this thought turns me on so much," he added, his eyes filled with tenderness. "Tell me you want to see him." She hesitated for a moment, her gaze darted to the side, and then she quietly, barely, audibly whispered, "Yes." He frowned slightly and leaned closer, as if trying to hear her, as if he wanted her to say it louder, so that all her doubts would disappear. "What did you say?" "I didn't hear," he insisted softly, his voice soothing and patient. "I want to see him," she repeated a little louder, and her eyes met his. Different and understanding were visible in her eyes. She knew that this was what he wanted to hear, and she trusted him completely, not being afraid to share her thoughts and dreams. He understood her better than anyone else, and this was their special secret, what allowed them to be so close to each other despite years of living together. When you reach 40, you begin to look differently at your endurance and abilities, at how your body reacts to different moments. Most energy, youthful spontaneity, all this already seems like a distant memory. But something happened between them that brought back that very spark that had been missing for a long time. It was this energy and the moment of intimacy that again gave him a feeling of aliveness and strength. He rolled closer to his wife, and they continued their conversation, hugging, plunging into each other's quiet, warm world. She held him tenderly, and he felt how much she loved him. She looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and trust. He hugged her carefully, his arms wrapped around her shoulders as if protecting her from all worries and worries. "Close your eyes," he asked, and she followed his request. She closed her eyes, relaxed, and trusted what he would say next. "Just imagine us together," he continued, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "Imagine that we are in a place where there is nothing but us, where there are no worries and thoughts, where there is only us. The idea that we are together, that we can enjoy each other, knowing that nothing will distract us." She smiled, her lips curling into a smile, reflecting the calm she felt. She felt him, felt his warmth next to her, and this made her feel light and comfortable. Her arm gently wrapped around his neck, and she snuggled even closer to him. Their embrace became tighter, and between them there was the very understanding that they were looking for. His heart beat evenly and calmly, as if telling her that everything was okay, that they were together. Her breathing was light and even, and she knew that at that moment they were both truly happy. They didn't need words to understand each other. All they needed was to be close, to feel each other's warmth, and to know that their love was alive and strong. In the end, they remained lying next to each other, enjoying this moment of peace and quiet. They lay huddled together, breathing heavily, but with smiles on their faces. Their hands intertwined, they felt each other's warmth, and both knew that this moment was only theirs, that it was real and important. Their love is more than just words or promises. It is their actions, their care, their laughter, and their support. And that's what made their relationship so special and important to each of them. I don't know how long we lay there before she whispered, "Wow, that was hot." I could only nod in agreement and fell fast asleep. When I woke up sometime later, my wife was not in bed. I thought I heard her in the kitchen, so I got up, made the bed, and went to the shower. I thought about the events of the last day and what was going on in my head while I took a shower, trying to find even the slightest doubt. Putting an end to these thoughts, I got out of the shower, dried myself, got dressed, and met my wife in the kitchen. She looked gorgeous in a little summer dress with obviously nothing underneath. In the sunlight, I could see the shape of her breasts pressing against the fabric. It was the perfect moment, and I remember it. She turned to me with a smile and walked over, wrapping her arms around my neck and giving me a deep wet kiss. She looked at me intently as we broke the kiss and confidently said, "I love you," as she walked away. "You never cease to amaze me," she added, taking a sip of her coffee. I poured a glass of water and replied, Well, first of all, I love you too. Secondly, what do you think about all this? She sat down at the counter, contemplating her answer. Honestly, I've been thinking about this since I woke up, and I admit this idea is very hot for me. I'm not sure if I'm more turned on by hanging out with Jose or how much the idea turns you on. I nodded in agreement. I admit that my mind works in mysterious ways. Her face became serious for a moment, and she continued, "But I don't know love. When you get involved with someone else, you never know how they will react, or you, or me for that matter. I love you no matter what. I just don't want to ruin anything by doing something that can't be taken back." I sat next to her and drank water, wondering how best to respond. Look, we trust each other, right? I love you to death, and that will never change. I think that's why we even think about it. We had so much in common, and this is just another thing along the way. I know that you won't leave me for Jose, but even when I sit with her, the thought of you being with him turns me on, and I think that if we trust each other and are honest with each other, we can achieve this. Jane took another long sip of her coffee and looked at me thoughtfully. I continued, "What if we created a set of rules that we had to absolutely follow in order to set some boundaries?" She looked at me a little unconvinced, but clearly deep in thought. First of all, I began, when one of us is uncomfortable with something happening, it stops. No discussion. Jane nodded in agreement, and at that moment I was excited that she had come. Secondly, complete honesty between us and Jose. She looked at me confused for a second. "You mean we should tell him, you know?" "Absolutely," I said. "That's the most important thing. Because I don't want him to think that he has overtaken me and that he is a better person. I can't allow him or anyone else to think that way for that reason. We are completely committed to each other, and he must respect our relationship. This is what we both want, and he has no way of taking you away from me. He can be a friend with great benefits, that's all." She nodded again. "I see, it makes sense, baby. Thirdly, he cannot be your friend. I don't want you coming to him with things you don't think you can tell me or be your confidant. It just opens up too many chances for something more emotional. I don't want to be one of those cuckolds who gets humiliated by their spouse. I'm doing this because I think this idea is hot as hell, and I don't want you to replace me with it on any level." "He's not the same for me now," Jane countered. "I know, and he can't achieve this. You guys might end up sharing something very intimate, but it won't go any further than that." "Okay, baby, that's fair," she added. "Fourth, I might want to observe sometimes. I'm not sure yet. I like the idea, and seeing him with you was exciting, but I don't know how often I want to watch it. Just know that I can take a peek, and if I don't look, you have to tell me everything that happened. I even like it when people look at me, my love. I know we've never tried this, but the thought of you looking at me and enjoying yourself seems pretty hot to me." She replied with a mischievous smile. "Anything else?" "Yes, just one more thing. If you feel yourself becoming too attached or experiencing strong emotions, which is possible, you need to be completely honest and stop it. Nothing should come between us." Jamie stood up and walked over to me, grabbed my face with both hands, and pulled me towards her for a long kiss. When we broke the kiss, she smiled at me lovingly. "Nothing will come between us, my love, I promise." I smiled back and asked, "So when is the next party?" "Just a week ago, my wife and I were discussing her intimacy with another man. I must admit that the pace of our discussions turning into actions was faster than I could have imagined. In this conversation, I brought up my fantasy of her being with our friend Jose. We shared our thoughts openly and honestly, and it turned out that she liked the idea. During our discussions, we shared our feelings for each other and concerns about how things could go wrong. In the end, we decided that we were so confident in each other that we were ready to take a risk. I'm not sure I can explain why this situation turns me on so much, but I'm pretty sure that if I were with another woman, my wife and I wouldn't have such a strong connection to allow it. So here we are, a week later, developing a plan to implement this idea. The week leading up to this event was, to put it mildly, eventful. We made love and passionately indulged in each other more than even in the first weeks of our relationship. I didn't think that discussing fantasies and what we each liked could be such a liberating experience. Being open about what each of us wanted only brought us closer together, if that was even possible. I'm sure most people won't understand this feeling. We've always had a great sex life, but this has added an unexpected boost of energy to our relationship, all for the better. Usually these kinds of parties on the neighbor's block are not on my list of interests, and to be honest, they are not there at all. But now I was looking forward to the next one. According to the plan, at the next party she was supposed to talk to Jose and gauge his reaction. Jamie was nervous about this, not knowing what he would say, but I'm a man, and in general, I can imagine how it could be. A hot wife who wants to be with a man who clearly wants her. There was almost no doubt about his answer. The main unknown factor is the third participant himself. How he will react, who knows? He must follow our rules, and the fact that we cannot control his thoughts and feelings raises many questions. We have to figure out how it will be and try to be as honest as possible. Obviously, in situations like this, things can get out of control faster than you think. But until we can all be open, I hope for the best. Although this is more like fantasy. Every day leading up, I became more and more nervous because we didn't have an exact date. Luckily, it was summer and we didn't have to wait long. Fantasies about how this would happen kept me awake many nights in a row, and I thought about what could happen, what she would do. Jamie had to work hard to cool my emotions, as she was calmer and more confident that this might not happen if there was no opportunity to talk. She made it clear that for her, this is not about sex, but about the process itself, and I should not expect only one final action. She likes it when a man has to pursue her to get what he wants. Everything else just turns into banal contact, and this doesn't turn her on. In our discussions, she said that she didn't have to be with another man, but if she did, it would be on her terms. It's fair. I guess it's the emotional side that gets me the most. But I trust my wife and trust that she can share that. On Wednesday, when Claire reminded my wife about her son's graduation party this weekend, my heart almost stopped. Heck, maybe this is the case. Jose will definitely be invited, and Claire's house is huge, which will give them plenty of opportunities to talk and what happens next. The number of people and children can become a problem because it is impossible for someone to catch them. I don't want people to start talking about us in neighboring circles. I'm starting to stress myself out. Damn, I'm so nervous. By Friday, I thought my wife was already tired of me. I couldn't take my hands off her, full of nervous, sexual energy. During the day, she even gave me pleasure so that I would calm down a little and give her the opportunity to complete her business. She liked it, but I guess she just knew it had to be done to calm me down a little. When something like this gets stuck in my head, it begins to take on a life of its own and play out repeatedly in my imagination. Don't be fooled by her calm appearance because in fact she was also waiting for this event. In the days leading up to Saturday, she got her hair done, her nails done, and I caught her in the shower, carefully putting herself in order. If something was going to happen, she wanted to be ready. Party day. I don't know what time I woke up on Saturday, but it was definitely earlier than usual. I could hardly sleep. My mind again went to the most exciting, seductive places. I think I spent the entire evening wrestling with images of what might happen. I can't remember the last time I was so excited and nervous about something. I knew I needed to leave my wife alone before going out because I didn't think she could handle my endless talking, attempts at intimacy, and excited remarks. Hell, I was horny as hell. I occupied myself with morning errands and boring tasks that could distract me from the upcoming event. I completed several long-started projects that for some reason suddenly seemed important to me. I even cleaned the garage. Imagine what these nerves brought me to. And so, when the time was approaching, I took a cold shower and dressed in my usual everyday clothes. Jamie stayed longer, and the wait while she got ready was excruciating. But when she finally came out, my jaw literally dropped. Of course, I have already said that my wife is a very beautiful woman, but at that moment, she looked simply amazing. Perhaps my bias plays a role in this perception, but damn, what did she look like? At the same time, nothing provocative, no screaming outfits, just restrained, elegant sexuality. She was wearing one of my favorite summer tops that she wore for special occasions. This tank showed off her breasts, and best of all, it had built-in support so she didn't need a bra. I knew this from experience, having touched her in public on numerous occasions in these clothes, and felt every curve of her breasts without a bra to get in the way. Very seductive. and I understood why she chose it. She paired the tank top with a matching skirt that ended mid-thigh and hugged her beautiful curves perfectly. The most interesting thing I noticed, she was without underwear in easy access mode, so to speak. Catching my appraising gaze, she smiled with mischief, and this smile seemed to say, "If he wants me, he can have me." "Wow, just great. You look absolutely gorgeous," I said sincerely. "Do you think this will do?" she asked. "Will it do? Everyone will go crazy. You might even make some of your friends jealous, because they will have to drive their husbands away from you," which was very likely true. "Oh, I don't want this to be too much," she said with slight worry. "Don't worry, darling, it's not too much. Everything is perfect. You can handle it, and they can handle it too." I tried to calm her down. I knew that she did not want to look provocative, but at the same time I understood that her outfit reflected her mood and anticipation of possible developments. "Okay, honey, just understand that nothing may happen. I don't know who will be there, and I certainly don't want to get caught. I'm almost sure that Jose will not be against our plan, but this does not mean that something will happen today. I don't know everyone who will be at this event, so things could get pretty crazy." She again tried to calm my excitement, but to no avail. "I know, my love, but I'm so nervous and excited. I don't know how I can control myself. Come on, if we don't leave right now, I'll have to take you right here," I said, turning to get my car keys. We barely spoke on the way to Claire's house, but it was clear that we were both nervous. The tension grew with every kilometer we passed. "Okay, honey," she said as we parked at the curb. "Just remember that I love you more than anything in this world, and no matter what happens today, know that I will never leave you." She leaned over and, to emphasize her words, kissed me tenderly on the lips, and then got out of the car. At a party, when we entered the house, it immediately became clear that complete chaos reigned there. Children were running around the house. People we didn't know were talking in the kitchen. Some of them turned around to evaluate the new arrivals. I noticed a few husbands staring at my wife for too long, but I couldn't blame them. After walking through the crowd, we finally saw Claire and approached her with a bottle of wine and a gift for her son. "I'm so glad you could come. It's just a madhouse here," she said, hugging Jamie and taking a bottle of wine, which she immediately put on the table. I quickly looked around, but Jose was nowhere to be seen, which was starting to worry me a little. I needed to calm down and just let things take their course. "The street is covered," Claire continued. "Jamie, would you like a glass of wine?" "Yes, I wouldn't refuse," she replied, and just like that, she found herself in her element. The rest of the girls from the inner circle came up from the street, noticed Jamie, and greetings were exchanged. After a short conversation, they went deeper into their usual world of gossip, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Winking at me over her shoulder, my wife headed for the exit. Then I realized that I hadn't eaten anything all day. Fainting would be highly inappropriate, so I walked through the kitchen to the backyard in search of food. The smoke and smell led me to my destination. Mike was there as I expected, working at the grill. Sitting down with a burger in hand, I grabbed a beer from the fridge to wash it down. After a few bites, I turned to Mike, "Big party. Who are all these people?" "Yeah," Mike responded. "Aunts, uncles, friends of parents, whoever is here. It's going to be a long day." I shook my head in agreement, a little frustrated by the crowd. I don't see how my wife can do anything about Jose if he's even here. My beer was already gone, so I grabbed another bottle, intending to quell my excitement with the flow of alcohol. I already don't behave well in large companies, but here my head was occupied with completely different thoughts, and the conversations around me worried me the least. The hour passed painfully slowly. I admit, I don't even remember what the conversations were about. Probably the same old stories, met a couple of new people who seemed nice. Someone's son is a local star. The local team is still playing terribly. The weather this summer is terrible. Everything that worried me least at that moment. My wife and I ran into each other a few times, and she seemed to be having a good time with her friends. But it was noticeable that she was looking around in search of Jose, who had not yet been seen or who was lost among unfamiliar faces. She kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Relax, honey, it's still very early." I nodded, a little upset, and headed for my fourth beer. It was time for me to slow down. "What's wrong with you, Brad? Do you look distant?" Mike said as I returned for a beer and a second burger. Yes, I answered innocently, although I knew very well that it was written all over my face. I guess I just didn't get enough sleep. I got up early all week. Why, he asked, turning over another portion of burgers and sausages. Yeah, it's just, I stopped mid-sentence because I noticed Jose walking out onto the patio. I quickly turned my head towards where my wife was, and she, as if sensing my gaze, also raised her eyes. I nodded towards Jose, and she frowned slightly, as if she didn't immediately understand my hint, but then she guessed. Standing up, Jamie looked towards the house, and a barely noticeable smile crossed her face when she saw Jose. She looked at me again, and her smile grew wider. Raising her glass in a toast, she drank the rest of the wine and tried not to show it, returning to the conversation, although I noticed a slight tension in her movements. What was that? Mike asked. What? I answered. You were saying something about being tired, and suddenly you stopped talking, Mike said, and I was relieved that he hadn't noticed my silent exchange of glances with his wife, but continued to fry burger after burger. Oh yes, I was just saying that I don't get enough sleep. Probably just a lot of work, I said, to which Mike nodded, continuing to prepare food for the whole crowd. Jose noticed me. He's tall like me and could easily see through the crowd and waved, making his way to the grill. I waved back and shook his hand, hoping my excitement wasn't conveyed through the handshake. Hi, Jose, how are you? I'm fine, he replied, taking the burger and accepting the beer from the refrigerator from me. Thank you, it's pandemonium in here, Mike. Mike responded briefly, yeah, without being distracted from his work. Is Jamie here with you? Jose asked me. You're already thinking about her, I thought, answering. Yes, she's there with the girls. I'm sure she'll be glad to see you. Jose gave me a strange look, as if trying to figure out what I meant, and took a few bites of his burger. He probably found it strange that the husband was saying that his wife would be glad to see another man. She really appreciates your communication, I added. I, of course, decided to play along with him a little, so that he would understand that I didn't care what he and his wife might talk about later, and that I wanted to have some control over the situation. I think he will understand everything when he talks to her. When he looked a little worried, I hastened to add, Don't worry, Jose, she doesn't have many male friends, and I'm glad she can be honest with you. Honestly, I don't believe that men and women can be just friends, as someone usually feels something more. But in this case, I decided to make an exception. Jose visibly relaxed, although he still looked a little confused by our conversation. Perhaps he was worried that I was angry because of how much time they spent together at the last party. But I wasn't worried. I knew that any conversation with my wife would clarify the situation for him. Not wanting to keep him any longer, I said, I need to go to the bathroom, and headed into the house, expecting that he would, as usual, take advantage of my absence to find my wife. Several minutes passed before I got to the toilet. There was a line, who would have thought. I wanted to quickly return and see where Jose had disappeared, although I was almost sure that I could guess. Finally, having done my job and returned to the patio, I was not mistaken. Jose was already next to a group of girls and was discussing something with them. Everyone was laughing and smiling. If only they knew. I knew my wife very well and saw from her expression that she was very nervous. She looked stunning, and this did not escape the gaze of Jose, who, when she was not looking, was clearly assessing her from head to toe. Jamie must have been eager to tell him about our plan, but the moment to pull him aside had not yet arrived, and she had to continue communicating with the others as if nothing had happened. The butterflies in my stomach were literally beating their wings, and I could hardly control myself while watching them. Thousands of thoughts were spinning in my head, but I tried to remain calm so as not to look suspicious. I grabbed another beer from the fridge and found a good spot where I could watch what was happening without attracting attention. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long. I soon noticed my wife leaning over and whispering something to Jose. He nodded in agreement with her words, and together they headed towards the house. Damn, I couldn't see the house from here. Jose led her through the crowd, and I tried to change my position so I could continue to watch them. I didn't want them to notice that I was spying, but I also didn't want to miss out on how their conversation would go. Maybe I should have asked her to call me on my cell phone to listen in, but that would have been to James Bond-esque. Crap! When they stopped in the corner of the patio away from the main part, I breathed a sigh of relief. If anyone had been watching me, they would probably have wondered what the hell I was doing. But everyone was too busy doing their own thing. I found a comfortable spot next to the pergola pillar near the pool, where I could see everything, and tried to look as casual as possible, although my hands were noticeably shaking. I, as I already said, knew my wife like no one else and knew how to read her body language, so I immediately realized that she was incredibly nervous about starting a conversation with him. At first, Jamie seemed to be talking about something pleasant, and Jose nodded as if everything she said made sense. Probably it was phrases like, "I like your company," "You're a great guy," "I like you," "We have chemistry," and so on. But then, as the conversation became more serious, Jose leaned in as if trying to better understand what she was saying. Apparently she repeated her words and his face showed obvious shock. Wow, what was he thinking? Jose pulled away from her a little, as if not believing what he had just heard. It is probably difficult to imagine what was going on in his head. At that moment, a beautiful married woman had just told him that she had permission from her husband. As they continued their conversation, I noticed that he began to look around, as if trying to find me with his eyes, perhaps with a tinge of guilt or embarrassment. I hid well enough, so I calmly continued to watch, not afraid that he would notice me. When he turned back to Jamie, she apparently said something else to him, and he finally nodded, indicating that he finally understood everything and agreed to continue the conversation. If I could read lips, I would have loved to read their dialogue, but it was obvious that she was probably explaining to him our rules of the game, since he nodded more attentively and occasionally clarified some points. After a few minutes, her shoulders visibly relaxed, as if the tension had subsided, and I realized that the secret was out and there was no going back. Now Jose was leading the bulk of the conversation, and Jamie seemed to simply compliment his answers, emphasizing the main points and reassuring him of anything that needed clarification. Finally, they ended the conversation. I could literally feel my heart beating so fast. She gave him a friendly hug, and he looked around again, perhaps trying to find me again, or to see if they had caught anyone's attention. I realized that everything went well, but I still needed to talk to my wife to make sure of this. Jose headed back towards the house, perhaps to go to the bathroom, or to thank his God for the unexpected gift of fate. I came out of hiding, noticing Jamie looking around for me, and when our eyes met, she smiled and gave a thumbs up. A wave of relief washed over me, and at the same time a new feeling of excitement. I pointed to the pool area, and she nodded, heading there so we could talk. It wasn't the most comfortable place to talk because of the splashing children, but it was fine for a short exchange. She hugged me tightly, pressing her chest against me, and I felt a sense of relief in her touch. "Well, it went pretty well," she said. Barely able to contain myself, I asked, "What did you tell him?" "Well, basically I said that I really valued his friendship and that I liked him." At first, he was a little confused by these words, until I explained to him what we agreed on. It seems he didn't quite understand what I meant, so I had to speak plainly. I said that my husband gave me the freedom to have a one-time relationship, and if he wants, he can use it. "Did you really just say that?" I asked. "Well, honey," she replied, "it's not every day that someone comes up and says, 'My husband let me sleep with you.'" I understand his confusion. I nodded, agreeing with her logic. She continued. "He asked what that meant, and I said, well, we like each other, and if it leads to something, then so be it. But I clearly explained to him all the rules, as you and I discussed. I think he was a little surprised to learn that you knew everything, and I understand him. But he admitted that he also liked me, and thought about it, but would never do anything to destroy our marriage. I think he was a little shocked himself, and maybe I was too. I hugged her to reassure her. Well, the hardest part is over, now let's see how everything turns out. Honey, to be honest, I doubt anything will happen here. There are too many people around, she said, gesturing toward the crowd. I told him that I didn't want him to see me as a random attraction, and that he needed to be respectful. I think he understood that. This probably sounds a little strange considering what I just proposed to him, but it is important to me that everything is mutually agreed upon and respectful. I hope I explained myself correctly, she added with a shrug. We'll see how things go. I'll give him space to express himself, I said with a smile. Jamie gave me a light slap on the buttock, a kiss on the cheek, and we went our separate ways. The situation is starting to develop. Some time passed, and several family members and friends left, and the atmosphere became a little calmer, although there were still quite a few people around. I rejoined my friends, and we laughed about the latest rumors and gossip while discussing the news. But to be honest, I was still more focused on watching Jamie so as not to miss any important moments. Finally, my patience was rewarded when a group of girls and a few guys sat down at the table with glasses of wine and other summer drinks, continuing their conversations. I noticed that my wife was next to Jose. Moreover, I could see that under the table his hand was resting on her leg. It has begun. I looked around carefully to make sure no one else had seen what I had seen, but it seemed I was the only one watching, and only because I knew what to expect. Jose gently ran his hand over her knee, and Jamie shifted slightly, spreading her legs slightly, allowing his hand to move from the top of her leg to her inner thigh. Taking advantage of this new position, he began to gently stroke her inner thigh. I knew he wouldn't dare go too far, but his hand was close enough to probably feel the warmth of her body. My excitement reached its peak. "Can you hear me, Brad?" Someone's voice rang out. "What?" I woke up from my trance. "You're not with us at all today," Mike said with a slight laugh. "Did you even hear anything from our conversation?" "Of course," I answered, not too confidently. "Yeah, I said if you're not careful, Jose will take your wife away," he repeated, apparently something I missed. Damn, I thought. Has anyone really already suspected something, even though it all just started? It can ruin everything before it even begins. Trying to smooth things over, I replied, "Jose? No, he's just a good friend. Jamie tells me everything they talk about. He just needed a friend, and they hit it off. He can talk to her all night if he wants. Jamie is probably tired of my voice by now." I added that last phrase with a laugh, and it seemed to take the conversation in a lighter direction. I hope my wife will not become the subject of gossip among this company. When I looked back at the table, I noticed that Jose had already left, and Jamie was laughing at something her friend said. I went to the refrigerator for another bottle of beer, and just at that moment I saw Jose heading in the same direction. We made eye contact, and his expression said, "We need to talk." Going first to the refrigerator, I took 2 bottles of beer and met him nearby. He looked a little scared, so I smiled reassuringly and handed him the beer. "Not what you expected, right?" I asked, trying to defuse the situation. "No," he replied, taking a long sip. "Not at all. Are you sure about this?" "Yes," I answered honestly. "Listen, you and Jamie have been friends for a long time, and I noticed that there was an attraction between you. This is what we talked about. I don't think she would have said anything if I hadn't brought it up myself, but now when it's discussed, it's pretty clear that's what she wants." I wanted my words to sound confident, and for the most part, I succeeded. Jose shook his head but didn't look entirely convinced. "She likes to be wanted," I continued. "After so many years of marriage, it's hard to give her that feeling all the time. She and I love each other to death, but having that kind of attention from someone else gives her confidence. Plus, it's exciting, it's new, it's risky. Probably Jamie is very attractive. It's just hard to believe that this even happens," he replied. "All I ask is respect for her and for us." "That's no reason to take my place, if you know what I mean," I said, although I wasn't really sure how we would all react to it eventually. No, I understand. I would never do that. I guess I just need to get used to the idea. Do we have any boundaries?" He looked at me, and I understood his question. "No," I replied, "do what you want." "Wow," he whispered with a small smile on his face. "Just be careful," I warned him. "People are starting to notice things, so try to be more reserved in front of others. I think it's a bit of a spice, but no one should start talking about it." At this moment, the girls laughed loudly as if they understood what was going on. Jamie looked in our direction and frowned for a second. I raised my beer to show that everything was fine, and she relaxed. Jose clinked bottles with me. "Okay?" Having drunk to the end, he headed back to Jamie and company. Everything is going too well, I thought. Maybe it's just a daydream, but I couldn't help but smile. As day turned to night, most of the guests left and the atmosphere became calmer. Jose seemed to take my warning seriously because he no longer spent as much time with Jamie as he used to. He tried to join in other conversations, but I noticed how he often glanced at her. I focused completely on them, trying to catch every little detail and every movement. I saw him passing by, lightly touching her thigh or running his hand along her back, touching her elbow. She leaned closer than usual when he spoke, touching his arm when no one was looking. The flirting happened right in front of everyone, and no one seemed to notice. Except for me, of course. I watched every movement and became excited with every second. I noticed Jose whisper something in my wife's ear, and she smiled, nodding slightly. Jose walked away towards the house, and Jamie walked towards me, literally glowing with happiness. "Oh my God, Brad, this is so exciting. I'm so horny right now," she beamed. I smiled knowingly. I'm happy for you and for myself too, but it's difficult to arrange anything in such a crowd. Now I tried to moderate my emotions. She looked at me with a sly smile. He just suggested that we meet him at the side of the house. He walked around to the front. It's already dark there, so she left the proposal hanging in the air without specifying what she meant. "Oh, okay, I'll go there first. I think they have a shed on the corner. I don't want to miss it," I added, trying not to show too much excitement, which literally caused me to stumble, heading towards the house to take a comfortable place. As soon as I walked away, Jamie took a deep breath and headed toward the house a different way, slower, so as not to attract attention. I got to the side of the house and noticed there was barely any light, which was perfect. I hid behind a shed at the edge of the yard, finding a place where I could see everything. A minute later, I saw Jose coming around the corner. He had to go through the bushes, but he managed, looking around, not noticing anyone, and pressed himself against the wall of the house in the shadows. I was glad that my eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and I could see quite well, excited by what was to come. When I saw my wife approaching, it felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. The moment has come. As soon as Jamie was in the shadows on the side of the yard, Jose practically pounced on her. He came out of the darkness and held her close to him, as if they had been apart for 100 years. They merged in a passionate kiss, their hands eagerly exploring each other's bodies. It was very erotic. I saw Jose wrap both his hands around my wife's hips and pull her close to him. Jamie pulled him towards her, her hands squeezing his back as their kiss grew deep and intertwined with tongues. I began to caress myself through my shorts, watching them give each other with insane passion, my thoughts racing in different directions. They continued to kiss with the same passion for several minutes, until Jose turned her and pressed her against the wall of the house. From my angle, I could see his hand move from her hip to her breast, squeezing it softly and firmly. He pulled away from the kiss and started trailing kisses down her neck. I knew she loved it, and I heard her moan softly in pleasure. I watched as Jose pulled her blouse aside, exposing her breasts, a move I had done many times myself, as if the garment had been specially designed for such situations. He touched her shoulder gently and then leaned closer, running his lips along her neck. She closed her eyes and held her breath slightly, trying to hide her feelings. Their meeting was filled with a special atmosphere. Every gesture, every movement seemed perfectly harmonious. A few minutes later, as he continued to caress her, Jose pressed his lips to hers, and Jamie, breathing heavily, hugged him tightly around the neck, drowning in the kiss. Her hair shimmered softly in the twilight, and I realized how beautiful and passionate she looked. My beloved wife carried away in the arms of another man. I felt excitement and a strange feeling of excitement that overwhelmed me from watching this moment. Jose carefully lifted her skirt, and Jamie, feeling his closeness, threw her head back, completely surrendering to what was happening between them. Their every movement, every gesture seemed to be calculated in advance to give each other joy and pleasure. Seeing Jose take care of my wife filled me with a mixture of surprise and admiration. This feeling did not diminish my emotions. On the contrary, I became more aware of how dear she is to me and how important her happiness is to me. Jamie, closing her eyes, barely audibly whispered words full of trust, tenderness, and joy. Jose stood up, holding Jamie to him. Their lips met again in a passionate kiss, and I saw her tightly holding his shoulders, as if not wanting to let go of this moment. Their embrace grew tighter, and I couldn't take my eyes off what was happening. I realized that for them it was not just physical intimacy, but something much more, the emotional unity that united them at that moment. I stood in the shadows, watching them, completely lost in their feelings. Their movements were smooth, filled with sincere trust and a desire to support each other. Jamie held Jose as if he were her support, and he responded in kind, holding her closer to him every moment. This moment was filled with a special intimacy, which, however, did not cross boundaries that could become unbearable for me. I never expected to witness something like this at our neighbor's graduation party, but now I realized that this experience brought me something new, a deep understanding of my wife, her desires, and our relationship. I felt a mixture of emotions growing inside me that could not be described in words. But despite this, I realized that this experience, although unexpected, helped me better understand Jamie and her desires as well as our own needs as a couple. It made me think about our relationship, its dynamics, and how important mutual understanding and acceptance of each other is. And although this evening was a test for me, it also became an opportunity to rethink our feelings and our connection, which seemed to only become stronger from such candid moments. And then I noticed Mike, who was walking towards us with a garbage bag in his hands. Damn, the trash cans must be around here somewhere. In a panic, I quickly put on my shorts and ran out of my hiding place, waving my arms above my head as if trying to stop a police car. Jamie and Jose were so caught up in the moment that they didn't notice me and continued making love outside Mike's house. As Mike got closer, I began to whisper louder, trying not to shout, but to be heard. Hey, 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 at the last. Hey. Jamie finally looked up at me, a little confused and clearly not understanding what was going on. I motioned her towards the back of the house and silently said, Mike is coming. It seems that Jose, standing with his back to us and continuing his movements, completely did not notice my warning. The moment Jamie realized I was trying to warn her, fear flashed in her eyes. She pushed Jose away slightly, and feeling the push, he finally turned around and noticed my panicked expression. At that moment, he tried to take a step back, but due to the shorts pulled to his ankles, he was unable to maintain his balance and fell onto the grass. At the same time, Jamie also staggered back and, hastily pulling on her skirt, pressed herself against the wall, trying to cover her breasts, which she hastily adjusted into her blouse. Her face burned with embarrassment as she whispered loud enough for Jose to hear, Someone is coming. In the light, I saw Jose sitting on the ground, hastily pulling on his shorts. At that moment, the rumors were true. Jose was indeed well-built, an inch taller than me. Mike kept getting closer, and Jamie pointed to the front of the house. Go away, go away. She whispered, almost breathing out the words, and Jose was finally able to get up and disappear into the darkness of the bushes, pulling on his shorts as he ran. As soon as Jose disappeared, I walked towards Jamie, trying to look as natural as possible, and put my arm around her to cover her with my body. In a fit of passion and perhaps to smooth the situation over, I kissed her, plunging into the kiss so that no one would notice the excitement on her face. I felt the taste of her own passion on her lips, realizing that everything that happened still seemed to remain between us. It was at that moment that Mike came around the corner of the house and, seeing us, froze in surprise, letting out a slight, frightened sigh. Damn, you scared me, he muttered, dropping the bag of garbage to the ground. We quickly broke away from each other, feigning slight confusion and embarrassment. We were just looking for a quiet place. Sorry, I said apologetically, trying not to sound suspicious. Mike nodded as if he understood and just grinned. Yeah, I noticed you've been gone for a while, he said, picking up a bag of trash and heading towards the bins. Jamie tried to remain calm, although I could see her breathing had not yet returned to normal. The situation changed in an instant from passion and excitement to the need to control yourself, but she coped with it, holding back her excitement as if nothing had happened. Don't worry, Mike said. I understand, although you don't have to hide, you're not teenagers. Yeah, I guess the moment just happened, so we decided to go a little crazy, my wife added, trying her best to hide it. Have you guys seen Jose? Someone was looking for him, Mike asked. The look on my wife's face was priceless, but I think the shadows hid all of Mike's emotions as I responded. No, I think he left recently, I'm not sure though. Fine, head back to the party. You guys can come a little later. Mike winked as he tossed the trash into the bin and headed back. My wife looked at me as he walked away with a what the hell on her face, was all she could get out before I pulled her towards me and kissed her passionately. Without missing a beat, she responded with equal passion, sliding her tongue into my mouth. When she broke the kiss, she said, "We need to go back." I shook my head, "Not until you take care of it. You're making me so horny right now." With these words, I came closer, and she lowered herself with a smile, showing her attention and care. She clearly knew how to please, being gentle and careful while being attentive to me. It was obvious that she wanted to make this moment special for both of us. I felt a wave of emotions so strong that at some point, I simply could not contain myself. She smiled at me, looking at my face with a clear sense of satisfaction. When it was all over, she stood up, slightly out of breath, and looked at me, straightening her outfit. I looked at her and couldn't help but smile. "I don't have a towel," she said quietly, laughing. I took the bottom edge of my shirt and wiped at her face, trying to make the whole thing a little funny. We exchanged smiles and I said, "I love you." She smiled back and said, "I love you too." Then she added, that was something new, adjusting her outfit, and we both laughed, pleased with the moment. "Yeah, well, I'd say a lot of new things happened today. I hope everything is for the better." I added a twist to get back to the party. "Well, we can talk about this later. Let's get back before people start talking." She grabbed my hand and turned with me as we walked. "So the rumors are true?" I asked, lightening the mood. "Oh, hell yeah," she responded with a wide smile. "We don't know what happened to Jose, but he didn't return to the party." We received a few knowing smiles from our friends, and this helped hide any suspicions they might have had about Jose. I accidentally spilled beer on my shirt to cover up the smell. I think it worked this time, and I can't wait for the next one. I'm sure Jose will want the chance to finish what he started. Watching my wife ride on the bed in obvious arousal is usually a thrilling sight for me that motivates me to take action. She was clearly having some kind of vivid sexual dream, because with every subtle movement of hers, I could hear sensual moans. First of all, my wife doesn't usually play with herself or daydream at a level that would cause the kind of reaction she's experiencing now. Secondly, less than 12 hours ago, I watched my wife having sex with our friend Jose like a desperate teenager at a friend's party. Don't get me wrong, everything went according to plan. I wanted her to have sex with him. It's just that now, seeing her in such an unusual, excited state shortly after such a meeting, I stopped. A sudden doubt began to creep into my thoughts. Imagining my wife with another man for a long time, and now that it has actually happened, creates two completely different states of mind. It wasn't that I was worried, not at all, but seeing her in this state made me wonder who it was in her dreams that turned her on so much. I'm not stupid. I know she's had fantasies about Jose before, and I fully expect there will be more in the future. Was I jealous? Perhaps I think.
Sunlight streamed through the panoramic windows of my office, illuminating the opulent space that served as my kingdom. The cityscape sprawled before me, a concrete jungle mirroring the one I had meticulously built within the walls of my corporation. A place I had worked hard for, the future I had always envisioned for myself was all mine, and it was better than what I had hoped for. From this vantage point, everything seemed perfect. The plush carpet beneath my feet, the gleaming glass and chrome furniture, and the carefully curated art collection adorning the walls, all testaments to my success. Yet a hollowness gnawed at me, a persistent emptiness that no amount of material wealth could ever fill. I felt like everything I thought would make me the happiest turned out to fill a little of the empty space inside me. My marriage to Richard was a carefully constructed facade, a strategic alliance forged for the sake of appearances. He was the heir to a media empire, his name synonymous with power and prestige. I, the ambitious young woman with a burning desire to climb the corporate ladder, saw in him the key to unlocking doors that would otherwise remain stubbornly closed. Love had never been part of the equation. Affection, perhaps, and shared respect for each other's ambitions. But the spark of genuine connection had been absent. from the very beginning. We moved through life as well, rehearsed actors, playing our roles flawlessly for the benefit of the world. We were with each other for the status and power it gave, and there was no denying it. We never tried for children because none of us wanted to be parents. Dinner parties were a tedious chore, social gatherings and exercise in forced pleasantries. In the privacy of our expansive home, an uncomfortable silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware and the hollow echo of our footsteps on the marble floors. We had different wings of the house to ourselves. We lived like strangers. My life had become monotonous and boring. I went through the same motions every day, and it was tiring. The arrival of Alex, the new marketing director, disrupted the monotony of my carefully constructed world. Young, vibrant, with an infectious energy that seemed to crackle around him. He was a stark contrast to the staid, predictable existence I had built for myself. Our first meeting was unremarkable, a routine introduction during a team briefing. Yet, as our eyes met across the conference table, a jolt of something unexpected shot through me. It was a flicker, a spark of awareness that sent a shiver down my spine. He was younger, yes, but there was a depth in his gaze and intelligence that belied his years. He listened intently as I spoke, his brow furrowed in genuine interest, starkly contrasting the glazed expressions I often encountered during board meetings. He was actually listening. Initially, I dismissed the feeling as a mere anomaly, a momentary blip in the carefully controlled world I had constructed. But as our paths crossed more frequently, the attraction simmered beneath the surface, a forbidden current pulling me towards him. The attraction between us was mutual, and it simmered between us like a live wire. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that he was younger than me, but all my efforts and self-denial failed. I liked whatever was happening between us, and in fact, I wanted more of it. He started leaving notes on my desk, witty observations disguised as work-related messages. I found myself lingering during our brief interactions, savoring the way his eyes held mine a beat too long. The subtle brush of his hand against mine as he handed me a file, the secret smiles we shared, the longing gaze, the guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the vows I had taken, the life I had built on a foundation of convenience rather than love. Yet the pull towards Alex was undeniable, a siren song promising something I hadn't felt in years. The thrill of genuine connection, the possibility of something real blossoming amidst the carefully constructed facade of my life. The late-night work sessions became a regular occurrence, a thinly veiled excuse for stolen moments of intimacy amidst the stacks of paperwork and the hum of the deserted office. Alex would linger after everyone else had left. The silence broken only by the soft click-clack of the keyboard and the occasional murmur discussion. One such night, the tension simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over. We were reviewing a presentation for an upcoming client, the air thick with the unspoken desires that had been building for weeks. I was panicking, and Alex reassured me that my prepared presentation was stellar and flawless. He told me I had nothing to worry about because the contract was, as well as, already signed. His hand brushed mine as he pointed to a statistic on the screen, the contact sending a jolt through me. I looked up to find his gaze locked on mine, his eyes blazing with an intensity that mirrored the fire burning within me. He leaned in, his breath warm against my cheek, and whispered, "I can't do this anymore, Evelyn." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. My mind screamed with warnings, the echo of my vows, the potential consequences. Yet the pull towards him was stronger, a force I couldn't resist. "Neither can I breathed, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. His lips met mine. The kiss a collision of pent-up desires. It was a hungry, desperate exploration, a desperate attempt to erase the years of emptiness that had preceded this moment. We stumbled back, the weight of our actions pressing down on us. But amidst the guilt and the fear, there was a spark, a raw, primal connection that had been missing from my life for far too long. His hands traced the curve of my back, sending shivers down my spine. We retreated to the plush couch in my office, the leather cool against our heated skin. His touch was a whirlwind, a map of exploration that ignited every nerve ending in my body. He whispered my name, a hoarse murmur against my skin, his voice a stark contrast to the silence that had become the soundtrack of my marriage. At that moment, The opulent office, the symbol of net. My carefully constructed life faded away. All that existed was the warmth of his touch, the frantic rhythm of our breaths, and the intoxicating feeling of being truly desired. We didn't need to go all the way. The unspoken understanding hung heavy in the air, a shared acknowledgement of the precariousness of our situation. This wasn't just a fling, a fleeting moment of passion. This was a connection, a forbidden haven amidst the gilded cage of my be. The attraction between us was alive, and there was no denying its heat, with the way he constantly drew us together. As the night wore on and the first rays of dawn peeked through the blinds, we lay tangled together, the aftershocks of our encounters still reverberating through our heads. Guilt gnawed at the edges of my conscience, a constant reminder of the line I had crossed. But as I looked into Alex's eyes, the warmth and understanding reflected there, I knew this wasn't just about stolen moments and fleeting pleasure. It was about a connection, a shared spark that had ignited a fire within me, a fire that refused to be extinguished. As the days turned into weeks, the stolen moments became a carefully woven tapestry in the fabric of my life. Late-night work sessions morphed into stolen lunches, business trips became opportunities for clandestine rendezvous in hidden hotel rooms. The thrill of the forbidden fueled our connection, the shared secret of a foundation for a bond that transcended the physical. Alex became my confidant, the one person I could truly be myself with. He listened without judgment, his eyes reflecting a genuine interest in the woman beneath the CEO facade. He challenged me, pushed me to see beyond the carefully constructed walls of my life, to rediscover the dreams I had, buried beneath the weight of ambition and societal expectations. He reassured me that I still had what it took, and as the door that had blocked my creative flow fell apart, I found that he was right. I was creating and drafting exciting projects again. My life felt brighter. The guilt never fully dissipated, a constant shadow cast by the vows I had spoken. But with each stolen glance, each whispered conversation, the connection with Alex grew stronger, a beacon of warmth in the cold emptiness of my marriage. One evening, during a particularly grueling board meeting, a subtle shift in Richard's demeanor caught my eye. He seemed distracted, his gaze lingering a beat too long on a young intern across the table. A flicker of something, akin to jealousy, sparked within me, a twisted justification for my own actions. It wasn't the first time I had noticed such behavior. Richard, like me, had mastered the art of maintaining appearances, but the realization that he too might be seeking solace outside the confines of our loveless marriage offered a cold comfort, a shared hypocrisy that did little to alleviate the weight of my own betrayal. Despite the ever-present risk of discovery, the thought of severing the connection with Alex was unthinkable. The emotional fulfillment, the sense of being truly seen and desired, was a drug I couldn't easily relinquish. I was a willing addict to the feeling that being with Alex brought me. So we continued our clandestine dance, weaving a secret life amidst the tapestry of our public personas, the board meetings, the charity gallows, the carefully orchestrated social gatherings. They all became a facade, a stage where we played our assigned roles flawlessly. But beneath the surface, a different story unfolded, a story of stolen moments, whispered promises, and a forbidden love that burned bright, a secret flame flickering in the light, darkness forever hidden from the world. Our secret life became a meticulously choreographed dance, a constant balancing act between the carefully constructed facade of my marriage and the exhilarating reality of my affair with Alex. Company events became opportunities for stolen glances and discreet touches, and business trips transformed into stolen weekends and hidden corners of the human. The thrill of the forbidden fueled our connection, the shared secret of a potent bond that transcended the physical. We were conspirators in a silent rebellion against the loveless marriage that had become my reality. Alex became my confidant, the one person I could truly be. He saw through the polished CEO's exterior, recognizing the woman beneath the carefully constructed mask. He challenged me and pushed me to rediscover the dreams I had buried, beneath the weight of ambition and societal expectations. The guilt never fully dissipated, a constant shadow cast by the vows I had spoken. But with each stolen moment, each whispered conversation, the connection with Alex grew stronger, a beacon of warmth in the cold emptiness of my marriage. One evening, during a particularly grueling board meeting, a subtle shift in Richard's demeanor caught my eye. He seemed distracted, his gaze lingering effect, beat too long on a young intern across the table. A flicker of something akin to jealousy sparked, within me, a twisted justification for my own actions. It wasn't the first time I had noticed such behavior. Richard, like me, had mastered the art of maintaining appearances, but the realization that he too might be seeking solace outside the confines of our loveless marriage offered a cold comfort, a shared hypocrisy that did little to alleviate the weight of my own betrayal. Despite the ever-present risk of discovery, the thought of severing the connection with Alex was unthinkable. The emotional fulfillment, the sense of being truly seen and desired, was a drug I couldn't easily relinquish. So we continued our clandestine dance, weaving a secret life amidst the tapestry of our public personas. The board meetings, the charity gallows, the carefully orchestrated social gatherings. They all became a facade, a stage where we played our assigned roles flawlessly. But beneath the surface, a different story unfolded, a story of stolen moments, whispered promises, and a forbidden love that burned bright, a secret flame flickering in the darkness, forever hidden from the world. One weekend, while Richard was away on a business trip, Alex surprised me with a weekend getaway to a secluded cabin nestled amidst the mountains. The isolation, the absence of the prying eyes that followed my every move in the city, was intoxicating. We spent our days exploring the surrounding wilderness, the crisp mountain air washing away the anxieties that clung to us in the city. At night, curled up by the crackling fireplace, we shared stories, dreams, and vulnerabilities we had never dared to voice before. In that haven of solitude away from the judgmental gaze of society, the weight of our secret seemed to lessen. We were simply Evelyn and Alex, two souls drawn together by a force neither of us could fully explain. As the weekend drew to a close, a bittersweet pang of reality settled in. Returning to the city, to the carefully constructed world we both inhabited, felt like stepping back into a carefully crafted play. But the memory of that stolen weekend, the raw honesty we shared, remained a beacon of warmth, a reminder that even in the midst of deceit, a flicker of genuine connection could exist. The years that followed were a constant tightrope walk between the two worlds I inhabited. The guilt never fully vanished, a constant reminder of the vows I had broken. Yet the connection with Alex provided a solace that Richard's presence could never offer. We navigated the complexities of our secret life with practiced ease, the shared knowledge of our forbidden love an invisible thread binding us together. We learned to read each other's unspoken desires, to find solace in stolen glances and knowing smiles across crowded rooms. Our affair wasn't a fairy tale, a grand escape from the reality of my marriage. It was a secret life, a carefully guarded oasis in the arid landscape of my existence. But in that hidden world, amidst the stolen moments and whispered promises, I found a piece of myself I thought I had lost forever. And as I stood on the precipice of another year, another carefully orchestrated social gathering, a flicker of a smile played on my lips. The secret life I led, the forbidden love I nurtured, was a burden, yes, but also a testament to the enduring power of human connection, a spark of genuine emotion that refused to die because I kept it alive, even in the darkest corners of a carefully constructed life. This was my confession of infidelity with the young man. You have heard something like this before. I would like to know if you have ever committed this kind of infidelity and how you felt. It will give me advice on how to deal with my future. Thank you for listening to me, and I wish you a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
I wanted to make sure nothing had changed, and although we talked about it a little last night, we were both too tired to have any meaningful discussion about it. And now I was faced with the first feeling of what? Doubt? No, that wasn't the case. The whole scene was still clear in my mind, and I was as excited as ever and had no doubt about what we had done. What then? I guess I just wanted to make sure Jane felt the same way, but I didn't have time to talk to her about it. However, the moment came suddenly, when a sudden gasp from my wife brought her out of her reverie, and she slowly opened her eyes to catch me watching her. "Hey, baby," she said sleepily. "Hello, love," I replied and kissed her on the lips. "What are you doing?" she asked, wondering why I looked at her at the exact moment she woke up. "Just watching you, love. You looked very peaceful," I replied, not wanting to make any assumptions. I had such an amazing dream," she muttered, as if recalling a particularly memorable moment. Really, I asked. Now the moment of truth has come. Here it is. Yes, I was lying somewhere on a beach, and you were coming down on me, but you took it so long and slow, keeping me on the very edge for so long. People were looking, but I didn't. Don't worry, I just wanted you to let me go, she described. Like this. Okay, that helps a little. First night after the event, I was still the first thing on her mind. She must have seen some relief on my face. What? Oh, nothing, my love. I was just looking at you, that's all. I admit I wondered who was causing this reaction, me or Jose's plus size. I wanted to remain as open and honest as possible. She smiled at me reassuringly and raised her hand to my face. You are my only love, no matter who I pleasure or have sex with. You say the nicest things, I smiled, feeling reassured. And about that, my wife continued, beginning to wake up more fully. Your size is perfect. Yes, Jose is a little longer and maybe a little thicker, but that doesn't make him any better. He's perfect for me, so Jose is no better. I looked at her, knowing she was right, but something in my head turned on at the thought that she was with someone who was a bigger size than me, and it turned me on. I understand love is just a fantasy that hooks me, or when you say that you want it, it excites me. My answer sounded uncertain, even a little stupid. I couldn't explain why it turned me on so much, just as I couldn't explain why the thought of her with another man seemed exciting to me. Okay, I understand that this is my thing, not yours, I agree, but it really turns me on. I tried to regain my confidence. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. You're so light, honey, she added, without a hint of anger or condemnation. Jamie finally looked at her watch. Wow, we've slept for so long, it's almost 9:30. We never do that. I didn't even notice the time, but apparently the stress of the previous night had tired us out more than we thought. There's something else we need to discuss, Jamie began thoughtfully. This whole party thing was really stupid. We could easily get caught, and this cannot be allowed. There was seriousness in her voice. I know, I thought about this on the way home. I think the feeling of risk added to the adrenaline, but actually getting caught would have been catastrophic. I don't understand why we thought it was a good idea, or why we had to wait, I agreed. I think it's just our normal behavior. We always meet everyone there. Plus, like I said, I wanted this game too, and watching Jose try to be inconspicuous, knowing what we were doing, added a little spice. But if they saw us, it would be difficult to survive. I think in the future we need to minimize this, if not stop it altogether. Jamie finished. Yes, I agree. When Mike almost caught you in the act, it was both terrifying and funny. Seeing Jose lose his balance with a naked man would have been even more comical if not for the threat of exposure. I knew she was right, but it was still exciting. We'll have to plan better next time, she said, smiling at me. I wondered if she was waiting for the next time. So you want him again, huh? I teased her. Oh yeah, he's amazing, that's for sure, she said flirtatiously. He's like a living sex toy, she admitted. If only it stays that way, I agreed. As if it had hurt us, my wife's phone beeped with the sound of an incoming message. She rolled over and picked up the phone. Jose was all she said. She typed something and sent it. The answer came almost instantly. He was clearly hoping for a quick correspondence. I noticed the corner of her mouth lift into a slight smile as she typed her answer again. Hey, I said, there are no secrets. Even in the texts, I said with feigned offense. She looked at me and replied, he wanted to know how I was feeling this morning and if I had any regrets. Another being, so what did you answer? I asked curiously. She didn't answer right away. Slowly leaning towards me, she pushed me, forcing me to lie on the bed and then confidently threw her leg over my body, ending up on top of me. At this moment, her movements were full of determination and strength. I told him that my only regret was that he didn't finish what he started. She said with a smile, continuing to move and guide me, maintaining my rhythm and efforts. What was happening was both exciting and unusual. She seemed to be immersed in her correspondence, continuing to communicate with another man, even while I was here, right with her, and was part of her experience. This mixture of intimacy and emotional intensity was both surreal and moving. He said that when he got home, he had to push himself to the end, and it was very intense. She told me not stopping in her actions and continuing to type a response on her phone. Having finished, she again focused on our actions, increasing contact, trying to immerse herself in this moment as I did my best to support her. There was a message saying bing, I told him he could try something more daring next time, and he said he was imagining a different scenario. Her voice was soft, filled with passion and excitement. She was still in touch with him, remaining, however, at that moment with me, feeling my touches and responding to them. I hugged her waist tighter, feeling her sink deeper into her feelings. Her body moved more and more confidently, her breathing quickened. It seemed that she was simultaneously in two worlds. One was her correspondence, the other was our shared experiences here and now. She balanced between them, finding pleasure in both, and every moment spent with her became more intense and meaningful. Bing, she typed again, then slowly leaned closer to me and whispered with a small smile. I told him that I wanted him to touch me all over the house, and he said that he could barely control himself and was about to lose control. I told him to let himself go. Her voice was excited, and she began to move in time with my movements. It wasn't long before the Bing notification sound on her phone sounded almost simultaneously as her body responded with a new, deep pleasure. She looked at the phone screen and showed it to me. There was a photo that captured the moment when Jose reached the peak of pleasure. Jamie typed something, but this time she put her phone aside and slowly slid down my body, finding me and plunging into a rhythm full of passion and intimacy. She leaned towards me, pressed her chest against my chest, and began to move with such intensity that I felt the full power of our unity. Every breath she took, every movement made me understand how much she yearned for this connection. I told him I wanted to be with him at this moment. She said, continuing to move, her rhythm becoming more and more exciting. I felt her body harmoniously adapt to my movements, and this gave even greater depth to our moment. I supported her, feeling how our connection was becoming deeper, as if time had slowed down and we were only the two of us in this world. The notification sounded again, but Jamie didn't even pay attention. Her movements became even more passionate. I felt how she was striving closer and closer to me, striving to feel every second, every moment. Feeling this, I realized that I too was approaching the breaking point. I'm on the edge, honey. I gasped as she completely embraced me, looking into my eyes. She continued to move, her body seeming to create a rhythm that we both followed until our movements became one. I hugged her tightly as a wave of pleasure washed over us both, plunging us into an unforgettable moment of intimacy and togetherness. Our breaths were intertwined, and our bodies were filled with bright flashes of joy and pleasure, as if the whole world was disappearing and only our love remained. Jamie, still hugging me, made one last gentle movement as if to complete this moment, leaving us both with a feeling of complete unity and warmth. We remained in this state for some time, enjoying the peace and quiet happiness that surrounded us, feeling that this moment would live in us for a long time. Bing! She reached for her phone, read the message, and smiling slightly, typed the answer again. He told me how much he wanted to have sex with me again. He said he liked giving me pleasure, and then asked if you knew I was texting him. I just told him yes, she said without any hesitation. I wonder if he'll be upset, I asked. I received Bing in response. She smiled as he read it and then typed something back. He said, okay, he's just curious. I told him we should talk later this week and figure out when this is all going to happen. Hun, I said. Perhaps he was a little disappointed. I don't care, Jamie replied. It turned me on so much, and besides, you're my husband. She leaned over and kissed me. The last Bing, which I assumed was okay, or something like that regarding how he wanted to have sex with her, either one was fine, and my wife and I got up to take a shower. Over the next few days, Jose was a bit of a pain in the ass. The sex stopped, but he kept the Bing contact with my wife constantly to the point that if I heard that Bing sound, I would get irritated rather than turned on. Love, seriously, I asked with some disappointment after another set of messages. What does he want now? It's like he moved or something. James smiled at me approvingly. I think he's like a little puppy now. He got a treat, and now he won't stop until he gets another one. You need to get him under some control. He can't treat you like a girlfriend or anything. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea. I said this without any real conviction. Oh no, babe, you've brought me this far, and we're not going to stop now. I like the bit of power I have at the moment, and I get some nice benefits, she added with a wink. She gave me a seductive look and slowly moved towards me. She placed her hands on my chest and gently kissed my ear, whispering, Except, babe, you know you want me to kneel in front of him and give him pleasure. She slapped my ass hard. Okay, then control yourself. We can handle Jose. You know I love attention. But you're right, he gets a little intrusive. This brought me out of my thoughts greatly. I probably deserved it. I thought to myself, I knew my wife and I knew she could handle it. I was just too weak. Does he even know I won't be here this weekend? I asked her. I'm a bit of a nerd and there was a gaming convention this weekend that I was also looking forward to, and James is not at all interested in. Given what happened with Jose, I had 2 reasons to look forward to it. So I began to think about what he and my wife might be up to. We talked and thought it would be better if they were alone next time, so this was the first opportunity to really take advantage of it given our schedules. They quickly disconnected me. No, he's not here this week. Otherwise, he'd probably be here by now. He won't be back until Monday. And just like that, my excitement was suppressed. It's very difficult to get so passionate about something like this and then not follow through on it. It's a real disaster. Well, I guess it'll just be me and all these nerds this weekend. The last few days of the week have flown by relatively quickly. James must have said something to Jose because his text messages turned into something more normal. There was another short sex event where desires were exchanged again, but that was it. By the time Friday arrived, I was out of the sexual frenzy that had been building up throughout the week. Is your sister still coming down? I asked to collect the last things. Yes, Friday, James replied. It's a shame Jose isn't here, I said in a final burst of real disappointment. There are many days and opportunities, babe. There's no need to get hung up on one thing. She reassured me, or I wasn't sure myself. I was pretty sure she was just as disappointed as I was. Okay, love, you know where I'm staying. I should be around most evenings if you need me for anything, but I'll be busy during the day. Say hello to your sister for me, and with these words, I kissed her on the lips and left. The drive to the conference only took a few hours, and the day's activities once I arrived kept me busy. So I didn't think much about the whole situation. By evening, I was exhausted, so I only managed to talk very briefly with my wife before heading to bed. She had a nice day with her sister, but spent the rest of the weekend just lounging around the house. Saturday was pretty much the same for me, so I went from one game to the next. Right after I had dinner, my wife texted me and asked if I would be here that evening. She wanted to talk to me and show me a couple of things she bought. The evening event I was going to wasn't that interesting, so I replied that I needed to finish around 8. She told me she would talk to me then, and I went back to it. After a full day of events, I grabbed one more bite and was back in my room by 6:30, leaving me time for a quick shower. Just after 8, my wife called. Hey, love, how's the convention going? She asked, although I'm sure she wasn't particularly interested in the details. Okay, today was fun, and what did you want to show me? I asked, I did a little shopping today, and I want to show you what I have. Wait a second, I'll send you a photo, she replied. I heard a few muffled sounds as she typed, and my own phone vibrated, indicating a message had arrived. I just bought a new phone and mistakenly hung up on my wife while trying to switch to text. I called her back and apologized, then figured out how to open the text. Damn it, I looked at a full-length photo of my wife in our bedroom, fully made up and very sexy. She was wearing a very lacy, sheer bra that lifted her breasts seductively, and her cleavage was deep. Her panties were the same lace and transparent. Finally, she put on a pair of 4-inch black take-me shoes. Fabulous. Wow, Jane, you look damn hot. Are you on a hot date or something? I asked, knowing that this was not true. Maybe so, she replied matter-of-factly. Wait, what? That's all I could ask. It turns out Jose couldn't stay away after all, so he cut the trip short when he heard you wouldn't be around. She said with obvious excitement in her voice, when will he be there? I asked, my heart starting to pound in my chest. He should be here by now, she replied, and I heard her take a deep breath. Do you want to eavesdrop? She asked, but knowing full well that was her intention, regardless of my answer. Oh my God, was she going to leave the phone on so I could hear? Damn, that was hot. The doorbell rang, and my breathing quickened, and my heart began beating faster. He was there, and she was going to meet him in this outfit. He's here, she said playfully. Maybe I'll ask him to send you some photos. I love you, she finished and put the phone on the dresser. I heard the distinct click of her heels as she walked towards her lover. I reached for my belt, trying to get my pants off as quickly as possible. I looked at the phone and decided to hit the mute button, not wanting to ruin their mood with my random noise. There were several minutes of silence, so I could only imagine what was happening in the lobby. After a few more moments, I heard her heels clicking in the distance as they got closer. When I thought they reached the bedroom, the clicking stopped and was replaced by loud kissing sounds, probably resuming what they started at the door. The sounds of lips smacking were often followed by soft moans, as I imagined one of them running his lips along a bare neck or nibbling on an ear. Through the sounds of a heavy makeout session, I could almost feel the pent-up sexual tension through the phone. They broke the kiss, and I heard a playful squeal from my wife, immediately followed by a soft pump as she was presumably pushed back onto the bed next to the phone. "You're so fucking sexy," I heard Jose say. "I should send him this photo if that's what you want," he continued, and I heard the electronic click of the camera shutter. And here my wife replied, so close to the phone in a very excited, sexy voice. A moment later, my phone vibrated. Message from Jose. The sounds of their lips and tongues moving together filled my ears as I picked up the phone and looked at it. Shit, how do I switch back to text? I heard a change in the pitch of my wife's moans and heard some tangible sounds, imagining that Jose was now pressing his hands to her large breasts. I was amazed at how much I could hear and how attuned I was to my wife's changing sounds and what she must have been feeling. When we're together, some of that sonic connection is lost in my own actions, so just listening was surprisingly erotic because I could feel their every touch here. None of this changed the fact that I wanted to see the damn picture. I repeated the process I did before and was finally able to text without hanging up. Text with pictures from Jose. James was lying on the bed, leaning on her elbows. Her body was relaxed, and the lace bra emphasized her graceful curves. The hair was slightly disheveled, as if Jose's hands had gently touched it many times, running through the curls. One could read desire and tenderness on her face, and her posture was open and inviting to intimacy. I hung up the phone and tried to focus my attention on what was happening again, closing my eyes to immerse myself in this moment and better feel everything that was happening. James' moaning intensified. Her breathing became increasingly ragged, and I imagined their hands touching each other, exchanging affectionate touches. The sounds resembled a slight rustling, as if they were carefully changing positions, enjoying every moment. Then I heard Jose's quiet, gentle words, "You have amazing beauty." I wondered if he had taken off her lace bra, because such things rarely remain on the body for long in moments of such intimacy. Jane laughed softly, her laugh light and happy, and soon their kisses filled the room with sounds of tenderness and passion. There was a slight movement on the bed, as if they were carefully changing positions to be closer to each other. A moment later, I heard the quiet metallic sound of a belt and then the slight noise of clothes sliding over the body. I heard Jane whisper, full of admiration and recognition, "You are incredible." Jose sighed quietly in response, and I felt their touches becoming more and more tender and sincere. The sounds of their kisses became deeper and deeper, and they felt a growing closeness and trust in each other. Jane laughed quietly, her voice full of warmth, and she asked Jose to move on. Her voice trembled with impatience and desire, and Jose's answer came with readiness and passion. They switched places again, and I imagined Jose gently kissing her stomach, then continuing his gentle touches, touching her thighs and the inside of her legs. I like to think about how he did not rush things, how with every touch he created a special atmosphere of intimacy and mutual understanding. He gave every moment special meaning, allowing Jane to savor every sensation and become completely immersed in the moment. A little time passed when I heard my wife sigh with satisfaction, and she joyfully said, "Yes, that's right." At that moment, I felt her presence nearby, and it gave me peace and pleasure. My wife and I always shared a deep understanding, and I was glad to see her happy. I heard the bedspreads move and imagined my wife holding them tightly, enjoying every moment. Her breathing quickened, and she urged her partner to continue. Her words, full of delight, rang out in the room, creating an atmosphere of intimacy and mutual pleasure. I felt how their interaction was filled with tenderness and passion, how each of them tried to do everything possible to make the other feel great. These moments, filled with sincere emotions and joy, made their connection even stronger. I heard my wife's partner continue to work, making efforts to please her. She whispered words of gratitude in response, and her smile was a clear reflection of her feelings. The sounds of them enjoying the moment created an atmosphere of love and passion in the room. I imagined how her eyes lit up when she smiled and how she gave herself completely to this moment, which only increased the feeling of joy and closeness between them. After a while, she told him to turn her over, and they continued. I could hear breathing, a slight movement of the bed, and I imagined them continuing together, finding new ways to show each other their affection and closeness. These moments were filled not only with physical intimacy, but also with the emotional connection they shared. I smiled, realizing that she felt comfortable and happy, which in the end was the most important thing to me. Her happiness was always my priority, and knowing that she felt so free and confident gave me a sense of peace. They were both enjoying the moment, and I could hear little happy sounds coming from my wife. Every moment was permeated with a feeling of deep affection and mutual respect. I could imagine them smiling at each other, enjoying every second they spent together. In those moments, I realized that our love and trust can be expressed in many different ways, and each of them is unique and important in its own way. It made me feel deep affection and tenderness for my wife, even at times when we were physically far away from each other. Our relationship has always been built on trust and mutual support, and this was especially important in such situations. My wife and I always knew that we could rely on each other, that each of us strives to make the other happy. I imagined how she might be thinking about me even at this moment, and it brought me inner satisfaction and joy. Every time I heard her happy laugh or words of pleasure, I knew that what we were doing was right, and that our bond was only growing stronger every day. These moments reminded me of how important it is to make time to be there for each other, support each other, and find ways to make each other happy. No matter the distance or circumstances, our love has always been the foundation on which our relationship was built. And every moment like this only strengthened our bond. It was an expression of our mutual affection and love, which continued to grow and develop, no matter what. Jane nudged him, and a rhythmic noise echoed in the room, like the head of a bed hitting the wall. James, disappointed, "Oh, let me know that Jose had stopped for a moment." All that could be heard through the phone was their ragged breathing. I couldn't understand what exactly was happening. "Bend over more," Jose asked, and I heard them move slightly. Jane made a small sound as her breathing became harsher. Slowly, she begged. Jose listened carefully to her requests. Their movements were careful and unhurried. After a brief pause, Jane's breathing became deep again, and I heard her exhale in a relaxed manner, regaining the confidence in her voice. "So yes, like this." The desire that sounded earlier returned in her voice. "It's nice," she said with a slight smile. Gradually, everything became more natural, and their breathing mingled as if finding a single rhythm. A few more minutes passed, and the pace began to gradually increase. James seemed completely immersed in what was happening, her voice becoming more excited. Jose continued, and the knocking of the headboard began again, repeating rhythmically. All I could hear were their excited voices and occasional words spoken mixed with noise. They both seemed to be completely caught up in the moment. "Oh, this is incredible," she said, her voice full of joy and excitement. After that, everything seemed to start to calm down. Heavy breathing gradually gave way to quiet exhalations, and then silence reigned, broken only by their tired breathing. "Damn," James said with a smile in her voice. It looked like they had reached their limit, and were enjoying a quiet, happy moment. A moment later, I heard the final click, as Jose took the photo and my phone vibrated. The photo showed my wife's face beaming with a smile and filled with satisfaction. She looked straight into the camera, her eyes full of happiness and peace. James said quietly, "That was a big moment, wasn't it?" I heard her laugh quietly, her spirits clearly high after everything that had happened. "I need a shower," I heard Jose say as his footsteps walked away from the phone. A moment later, I heard my wife's quiet voice on the phone. "I hope you liked it, honey. I also need to get myself in order, just like you, I'm sure. I'll text you later. Love you." With these words, the connection was broken. "Wait, what?" What does it mean to put yourself in order? Are you going to take a shower too? With him? She can't leave me like that without giving me answers. I reached for a towel to dry myself a little, but my thoughts were busy with various guesses. Did she do this on purpose? He can't stay overnight, we agreed on that. I wanted to make sure that there wouldn't be any intimate moments between them, like sleeping together or sharing secrets, things that could strengthen emotional attachment. What is she doing? I looked at the phone for a long time, hoping that it would give me the answers I needed. But having achieved nothing, I decided to relax a little and take a shower. Maybe she'll tell me herself after all. I hope so. I took a hot shower. I began to realize how tired I was. The whole incident exhausted me, but my mind was still on fire, going through all sorts of scenarios, many of which I didn't like. I trust my wife. I know I need to pull myself together, but this was driving me crazy. My mind is sometimes my worst enemy. An hour later, I was lying in bed when my phone vibrated. It was a message from my wife. Sorry, honey, it took me a while to get ready, and I'm really tired. Because I know your mind must be on the run, I'll tell you this. After he lathered my breasts for a long time, and I rinsed him thoroughly, I pleased him again. And he had sex with me in the shower. This is so hot, I wrote in response. I guess that you would like this detail. I hope you enjoyed it too. I definitely enjoyed it. I replied, that sounds so incredible, love, very sexy. He was really good, she admitted in the message. I understand that, I responded. Don't worry, he's gone and I'm exhausted, so I need to sleep. Love you, try to sleep too, she concluded. Love you, I answered, and then satisfied, he fell asleep. The gaming convention finally ended late Sunday afternoon. I could barely concentrate all day, remembering the events of last night, but I came here for a reason, and I didn't want to cut the trip short. Internally, I was at odds. I could barely sleep and had trouble focusing on what was happening. The thought of my wife making love to Jose completely took over my mind, filling it with many digital images. I've already satisfied myself twice today, once in the middle of the night, when I had a dream in which she was standing in the shower, leaning against the wall and Jose was possessing her. The second time was when I woke up in the morning with excitement. I had to stop myself from doing it a third time when I took my morning shower. Without effort, my mind began to imagine what my wife had been doing since she sent me her last message last night. She said they made love in the shower, and I had no reason not to believe her. I spent the day somehow, and after the end of the convention I almost ran to the car. With a 3-hour drive home ahead of me, I hoped to gather my thoughts and focus on the road. It's hard to explain, but in my current state, I felt aroused by what many might consider my wife's infidelity. In recent weeks, my wife and I have undergone something of a sexual evolution. I call it evolution because I am sure that these feelings have always been inside, but it takes a perfect couple to realize them. Given the nature of our fantasies, most likely they would never have come to the surface, if not for the coincidence of certain factors. I know we found the perfect partner in each other, allowing us to build the trust and understanding needed to evolve as we have. For my wife Jane, it was about being pursued, desired, and object of desire. She loved the thrill of chasing someone new and then getting the reward of being caught. When you're in a relationship for a long time, the element of the chase goes away to some extent, and she simply wouldn't have the chance to experience it again. My wife and I love each other, there is no doubt about it. But over the many years of living together, the poignancy that is inherent in the beginning of a relationship has disappeared for her. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how relationships work, and we both understand that. For most people, the main thing in a relationship is comfort in each other, and that's okay. Every couple has their own joy, and what makes one couple happy may not suit another. It is because we love and trust each other and can speak openly about our hidden desires that we have the opportunity to explore parts of ourselves that we might otherwise never know. For Jane, when I told her about my fantasy of seeing her with another man, it helped reveal her own desires and fantasies about what she wanted. We turned out to be the perfect combination that could make our common desires come true. On my part, everything was a little more complicated and difficult to explain. Most men would probably look at what I do and call me a cuckold or think it was weird. I don't expect people to understand how my wife and I feel, but I don't want it to be judged either. Somehow, when I know that my wife is aroused by another man, it makes me want her even more. Knowing that she is enjoying herself fills me with a wave of excitement, and the fact that she continues to love me unconditionally makes it possible for us to succeed. When she tells me how it makes her feel, it's like I'm experiencing her emotions myself, like I feel for a moment what she feels. This is not at all a desire to be replaced or a desire to close some gap for her. I have no complexes about my masculinity, and this has nothing to do with the desire to be humiliated. The very thought that another man excites her, especially if he is physically superior to me, for some reason fuels my desire for her even more. I am aware that there is a certain amount of submission in me that I have not yet fully understood, but it has nothing to do with humiliation or dominance as happens in similar situations in porn. For us, it just works. While I was turning over all these thoughts in my head, the road flew by unnoticed, and I found myself almost at home. Then I remembered that I hadn't eaten all day and was already dying of hunger. So I decided to stop at the nearest takeaway cafe, ordered food, and literally ate it in a matter of minutes. It was already about 10 p.m. when I arrived at the house. I felt tired but also excited. All the events of this weekend have emotionally exhausted me, and the long day, lack of sleep, and stress from it all took their toll. Grabbing my bag from the car, I walked through the dark house and upstairs to the bedroom. In the semi-darkness, I saw my wife curled up on her side, clutching a long pillow to her chest and snoring softly. She seemed especially beautiful in the dark, and I quietly walked up to her bed and kissed her on the cheek. She muttered something softly as if she was trying to say something, but could not, simply from fatigue. I smiled to myself, quietly undressed, put on gym shorts and an old t-shirt, and lay down next to her. She rolled over, pressed herself against me, and her large breasts were against my chest as she hugged me. She mumbled something again before falling back into a deep sleep. I closed my eyes and instantly fell asleep. I woke up slowly, barely emerging from a deep sleep. It was that morning state between sleep and full awakening, when my imagination works especially brightly. In this half-asleep, half-awake state, I often imagined my wife and I in the most revealing situations. At that moment, I was imagining Jose and I surprising my wife in the shower. She leaned forward, pressing herself against me and holding on to me as I plunged into her lips. And Jose, grasping her hips from behind, enjoyed her to the fullest. Feeling that I was awake, she lifted her head from my chest and gently kissed me on the lips. "Good morning, honey. Did you have a good dream?" "My heart is beating so fast," she whispered, continuing to slowly caress me. I replied almost speechless, "You'd love it." "So you would like it," James said as she slipped her hand under my shorts and gently grabbed me, continuing to gently caress and kiss my neck. I smiled, feeling her grip on me more and more, and said, "I think you would like this. I imagined you enjoying yourself with Jose in the shower." "That sounds tempting," she replied, squeezing me tighter and giving me even more confidence in my movements. Then James stopped for a moment and, helping me out of my shorts, settled between my legs, looking at me with warmth and desire. "Why shower?" she asked. I smiled. "You kinda gave me that idea last night. Have you stopped thinking about him having sex with me in the shower?" James asked. Several times I laughed in response, then quickly focused her attention. After spending time with her on the bed, she had to do her best to get him in the mood again. She came up to me and began. I felt a warm feeling come over me as her touch began to take effect. I lay there with my legs spread, enjoying this moment for a few minutes before continuing. "Did you like what happened, love?" She moaned affirmatively, continuing her activity. She paused for a moment and added, "I really enjoyed it. It was a special feeling." One of the things I especially liked after all these changes in our relationship was how open and emotional my wife be. She used to rarely say anything during our intimate moments, but now she has completely changed. She became more open and sociable, sharing her thoughts and impressions, including her recent adventures with Kosei. I liked it. It turned me on when she told me what happened between them. She liked that I was interested and attentive to her experiences. "I see you standing in the shower and enjoying this moment," I whispered, enjoying the warmth of her words. My wife stopped, but her hands were still on me, maintaining this feeling of closeness. When it all started, he picked me up, and the water was running down my body, she said dreamily, immersed in her memories. Of course, I answered, trying not to lose control of myself. We continued like this for a few more minutes, and soon she was next to me again, hugging me and feeling our connection. This whole moment was so filled with emotions that I simply could not help but feel this closeness. We were together and I didn't need anything more. He was there and I felt his support, she continued, describing her feelings when our gazes crossed. At that moment, emotions overwhelmed us both, and it became difficult for me to keep everything inside. It was too strong and too beautiful. She continued to talk, her words filled with emotion as I felt like I was about to reach my breaking point. When this moment came, I felt all my energy come out. We were together, and this feeling of closeness was simply incredible. She stayed close, slowing down the rhythm, and at that moment I felt the fullness of our connection, which cannot be described in words. For the next few minutes, we just lay next to each other, enjoying the silence and each other's warmth. Her head lay on my chest, and I stroked her hair, feeling myself slowly returning to reality. Everything was so calm, as if time had stopped, and I wanted this moment to last forever. I feel so good with you, she said quietly, raising her head and looking into my eyes. Her gaze was filled with love and tenderness, and I felt a feeling of complete satisfaction and happiness blooming in my soul. Me too, love, I replied, smiling back at her. I'm glad we went through it all together. We've only gotten closer. She smiled, kissing me tenderly on the lips, and I felt the confidence growing inside me that our future would be as wonderful as this moment. We were together, and nothing could separate us. Jane collapsed on top of me, her ample breasts pressing heavily against my chest. She was breathing heavily, trying to pull herself together. Wow, I managed to say between breaths. I missed you, Jane replied, lifting her head and kissing me tenderly. It was so hot, I understated. How true was that, I asked. My wife smiled because I knew that sometimes she sugarcoats things for my sake. All this, she said as if nothing had happened without raising her eyes. I smiled in gratitude. I love you, I replied, kissing her forehead. I love you too, she added a little sleepily. I think we fell asleep for about 20 minutes before I woke up abruptly. Jane rolled me onto my back. Did you enjoy listening? Yes, very much, I replied. It was interesting to know that you were eavesdropping. Maybe trying to figure out what was going on, she added. Photos helped from time to time. I can't believe he had a special kind of sex with you, I chided with a smile. Well, from now on I will get this kind of sex too, I demanded. You can have whatever you want, she giggled. 3 of us, I asked, knowing the answer. Jane slapped me on the chest. No, you know that I'm not into women. And despite all this, I don't think I can handle you with another woman. Is this what you want? She asked, becoming serious for a moment. We'd had this conversation before, and the truth was that I didn't need another woman. There was one thing I wanted to try, and she knew, but we never discussed it in detail. I decided to bring this up again, just to make sure we're on the same page. You know, there's really only one thing I'd try, I added. She was silent, letting me speak. If a woman with a cute face and beautiful breasts suddenly came out, I would have a hard time resisting. I felt my heart pounding as I said this. It is still quite difficult for me to discuss this, despite the fact that we have already touched on this topic. I have absolutely no interest in men. I guess it has to do with that malleable side I already mentioned. I fantasized about doing it with a beautiful woman who had changed her gender. I just want my wife to understand that I have no interest in men or desire to switch sides. It's just the idea itself that intrigues me, not the lifestyle change. I'm embarrassed to bring this up because I'm a little shy about it, even though I realize it's a situation that will probably never happen. My wife tried to use a sex toy a couple of times, but I saw that it was not for her. I understand you, dear, she answered, as if avoiding my answer. It's just that sometimes it seems to me that you want someone else. Honestly, I don't need another person, my love. Believe me, if you were interested in girls and wanted to experiment, I would be all for it. But I know that's not true. Plus, when you involve someone else, it's always difficult to predict what might happen. You and I were lucky to have Jose, but even he became too attached to you, almost like he was your boyfriend now. I don't like it. I think he can be understood given the circumstances, but it worries me a little, I admitted. The wife thought for a moment. Perhaps you're right. He wrote to me all day yesterday. knowing that you were not at home. I wanted to come while you were gone. I said it's better to wait for you. I had already begun to suspect that Jose had begun to go too far, and confirmation of this did not make me happy. I knew my wife could handle it, but one of our fears was how the other man would react. I don't want to sound sexist, but it seemed to me that it should be easier for a man to maintain emotional distance than for a woman. We didn't want it to turn into a relationship. It had to be mutual desire, play, excitement with a little flirtation, and an exciting ending. So far, everything had been going well, but over the last week, Jose had become really emotionally involved, texting and calling frequently. Do I need to talk to him? I asked, although I doubted that it would change anything. Don't know. I think I can handle it myself. I began to respond to his messages more slowly, and I didn't answer all his calls. I want him to take the hint, she answered, and laughing added, You saw his size. I smiled, appreciating the joke. Jamie continued, but I don't want to become just a sex toy for him. The process itself, the moment of risk, turns me on. I think that's why I like to flirt with him in public. It's dangerous, but I like how he reacts without being able to do anything. I understand, I agreed. You don't want it to become just a regular thing. Otherwise, it will lose its magic. That's right, she confirmed. It excites me when we are in company, and I see how men pay attention to you. But next time you and Jose are together, I want to watch, I said. Jamie smiled. I was hoping you would say that. I want you to watch, too. I was so excited when you listened and got a photo last time. Knowing that you get turned on by watching me with him just drives me crazy. I want you to see me. I felt like it was starting again. But after last weekend, I doubted I could get it going again so soon. But, I continued, I don't want him to know that I'm watching. I agree. I don't want him to feel awkward. Maybe he'll find out when you both get busy with me. She suggested, looking at me with a mischievous smile. I know you want this, and perhaps with another man, I played along. Maybe we can start with at least one. She laughed, but I knew her better. So, what are we going to do with Jose in the near future? I returned to the topic. Let me deal with him, honey, she said. I won't answer him so often. Let him understand that in relations with him, it is I who set the conditions, not he. You are my husband, not him. Let him stay in his place. Satisfied with our conversation, I finally stood up and began to get ready. And when do you think you will have your next meeting? I asked, putting on my shirt. Don't know. I want him to wait a bit. So maybe at the Labor Day party in a couple of weeks. This will suit him, but how can you survive without him for so long? Jamie came up to me and grinned. You are all I need so I can handle it. Although, maybe I'll miss his other a little. With these words, she patted me on the thigh and went to the kitchen. Although it won't be like the first time, she added from the kitchen. It was too dangerous back then, and I don't want to repeat something so risky. I think you get excited by the risk, my love, I commented. Jamie chuckled slightly. Maybe, but it's still too dangerous. If we are to continue, I want him to wait so hard that his nerves will break down. Cruel, I laughed. Of course, we took a risk when she allowed herself a little game in public, but it seemed to me that it turned her own. Anyway, everything was going well so far, and I just hoped that wouldn't change. Over the next couple of weeks, we had to fulfill two conditions. First, it was necessary to keep Jose at a distance, so that he would understand who makes the BIA rules here. I didn't want him to get used to the fact that he could always get what he wanted when he wanted it. Jamie decided to keep a low profile, responding to his messages intermittently rather than maintaining constant contact. Although one night they had a heated exchange, and she showed me all the messages. Right after that, she made passionate love to me, so thanks to Jose, I was even pleased to be the beneficiary of their little game. Jamie texted him that because of her schedule, they wouldn't be able to meet until the end of the summer before the Labor Day party our friends usually attend. Jose will have to accept that everything happens on her terms. She could have simply invited him, but she decided to remind him of the boundaries he seemed to be trying to cross. The second point of our plan was to prepare for their next meeting when I would observe. The normal living room environment was not conducive to covert surveillance, so we spent some time rearranging the furniture to give me a better view without being noticed. We decided that I would be in the coat closet, and this required changing the layout of the sofas and the overall furnishings of the room. I've long fantasized about seeing my wife with another man on our big couch. It allows for a variety of positions, as I've always imagined in my thoughts. From the closet, I will have a great place to observe while remaining unnoticed. After we organized everything, all that was left was to wait. A week before the party, there was a change that I thought was even better for us. Instead of holding the party at Mike and Claire's as usual, they decided to hold it at the McMullins. The McMullins spent the summer building an addition to the house, which was finally completed and ready for showing. The addition was a swanky games room with a bar and pool table leading out to their spacious deck. The McMullins probably have the biggest house of any of our friends, which means there will be plenty of opportunities for Jamie to sneak away for a little mischief. I don't know how many rooms they have, but the layout clearly allows for multiple hiding spots if the opportunity arises. We'll see, but I was very excited about the prospects. That week, Jamie became even less available to Jose. She wanted him to be really excited by the time they met, so she responded to his messages, even less often and in shorter phrases. The poor guy is probably suffering, but that's the price he pays for his relationship with my wife. I like this reversal of roles and control over the situation. Jose was starting to show too much initiative, as if he wanted everything to be his way. I think he wasn't deliberately trying to impose his dominance, but the situation was clearly going beyond the limits and he wanted to seize control. Jamie set boundaries again, and that was fine with me. I didn't notice any changes in our relationship with her, so everything was fine. Given the circumstances, I sincerely believed that everything was perfect for us. The day of the party finally arrived, and it was obvious that Jamie was very excited. She spent more than usual getting ready, doing her makeup, and doing her hair. The day was unusually cold, so she chose not shorts or a bikini, but skinny jeans that emphasized her hips and round buttocks. In addition, she wore a tight t-shirt, which, although it did not reveal her cleavage, seemed to say, "Yes, my breasts are magnificent." Jamie wore elegant, heeled boots that complemented her look perfectly. She certainly looked amazing. "Well, how do you like it?" she asked, trying to look innocent. I answered her with a meaningful smile. "Don't even pretend that you don't know what effect you want to achieve." I am a man who is already married to her and has seen her many times, but even now I was trying to mentally undress her with my eyes. I can imagine what Jose and the other men would think. Okay, no risks this time. I don't want a repeat of the last party. I know, Jamie agreed. We don't need anyone talking, so just be careful around others, I added. I know, she repeated. That's why I chose jeans. I don't want him to get the idea that a quickie can get by. Yeah, I replied in disbelief. Well, yes, and because they perfectly highlight your figure and breasts. Be more polite, my wife pretended to be offended. Okay, let's go. We're already late. I finished gathering the last things for the party, and we headed out. When we arrived at the McMullins, most of the guests were already there. About 30 people, mostly adults and a couple of teenagers, ran around. We exchanged standard greetings with the hosts and the small group in the kitchen. Hi, how are you? We were told that most of the guests were in the games room, so we decided to head there. Walking through the house, Jamie and I couldn't help but be amazed at how spacious the rooms were. Along the long hallway leading to the garage were a laundry room and a spare bathroom, an area that I thought would make a good retreat. But I kept my thoughts to myself. There is no need to rush things. I'm sure they will figure it out on their own. A noise from the games room led us to the spot, and upon our arrival, we were greeted again. Jose was there, and when he and Jamie shared a brief hug, I noticed that she was pressing her chest against him while she was simply hugging other men from a distance. I don't think anyone noticed it, but I'm an excellent observer, and this time I was looking for any signs. I went off to say hello to my friends, and Jamie went to a group of women, and everything went on as usual. Like at the last party, I decided to give Jamie some space, so I spent most of the time chatting with the guys and women. I joined a team game of pool, which allowed me to sneak a peek at what was going on between Jamie and Jose. We must give them credit. They were very secretive. Like I said, I'm very observant, and since I was purposefully watching them, I don't think anyone else noticed their behavior. There were light touches. Jose's hand passed over her thigh a couple of times, Jamie accidentally pressed her chest against him. A couple of jokes were exchanged in a low voice. In general, it all looked like innocent flirting, which, although it warmed up the situation, did not attract the attention of a casual observer. By all accounts, Jamie was quite enjoying his attention. I looked around the room to make sure that no one was paying much attention to their interaction, and by and large, that was the case. However, I noticed that the McMullen son was looking at my wife with interest. I'm sure Jamie would have seen this kind of attention as more of a joke, but I'll mention it later anyway. After my game, I sat down on a bar stool to rest my knees when I noticed Jamie lean over and say something to Jose. He nodded, and she headed towards the exit before meeting my gaze and giving me a sly smile. I noticed a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. A minute after she left, Jose also quietly left the room. The situation began to become clearer to me, and I felt my heart beat faster. They asked me if I wanted to play another game, but my thoughts were already far away, immersed in strange, seductive images, and I refused. Instead, I sat at the bar, trying to concentrate on the game and control my growing excitement. 1 minute gave way to another, 5 minutes turned into 10, and then 15. Nervous excitement began to express itself in the tapping of his foot and drumming of his fingers on the glass of beer. The billiard game changed to another, and I was again asked to participate, but I could not concentrate. I warned her not to take any chances, but 15 minutes seemed like a long time and increased the risk of them getting caught. Finally, after almost 20 minutes, Jamie returned to the room. The first thing I noticed was that her shirt was pulled out of her trousers, but at first glance, it was not very noticeable. She quickly looked around the room, found me still sitting in the same place at the bar, and walked over to me. She grabbed a glass of white wine and settled down next to me, trying to look as if nothing had happened, and immersed herself in the game. "Your shirts are unbuttoned," I commented, sipping my beer. "Shit," she whispered, lowering her hand and pulling on her shirt as if that would make her feel better. Smiling, I said, "I don't think anyone will notice, but I take it everything went well." Jamie smiled mischievously, you could say that. She took a sip of wine before continuing. "He told me how much he missed me and wanted me all day. He's already grabbed my ass a few times today, and I've accidentally rubbed his chest every now and then." "Yes, I noticed that," I said. "I thought so," she said, taking her hand into mine. "So I asked him to meet me in the back bathroom, but to wait a few minutes after I left," she continued. "I think it worked well. No one seemed to notice." I advised her to continue. She left me there with my thoughts for a minute or two, letting me think about it. Of course, she specifically knew that the unknown was killing me. Finally, she continued when people were out of earshot. "When he got to the bathroom and locked the door, he practically attacked me. He pushed me against the wall and kissed me deeply. I could tell he was already horny as he pressed himself against me. After a few minutes, his hands began to carefully move towards me. He pulled me close, hugged me, and I felt his touch become more confident. Gradually, he began to explore my shoulders and back, and as if from excitement, his movements became a little awkward and impetuous. As if he could not control his desires, she said, breathing deeply. There was something in her voice that sounded like a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. While she was talking, I suddenly noticed that I was involuntarily rubbing my fingers on the armrest of the sofa. This story caused me some tension, and I consciously tried to regain my calm, trying to focus on her words. He held me tighter and tighter, and I began to feel my heart beating faster. He tried to express his feelings, to show how important I was to him, and this touched me. His touch was insistent, and I knew it was important for him to feel the closeness that we had been waiting for so long. Jane continued, her voice becoming a little quieter, as if she was remembering every second of this moment. "I think it was more than just a physical attraction, especially after weeks in which we could hardly be together," I added, trying to lighten the conversation a little. We both smiled. "Yes, that's right. These weeks have been a real challenge," she continued, taking a large sip of wine as if collecting her thoughts before revealing something even more personal. "And what happened next?" I asked, trying not to show my interest too obviously, but realizing that I really wanted to know the continuation. "Well, at some point I realized that I also wanted to act. I gently pushed him away, and he took a step back, leaning on the bathroom sink. I sat down, and he looked down at me with such sincere hope and desire in his eyes that I could not resist this moment. It was a purely emotional impulse, a combination of our feelings and trust in each other. It was as if our entire connection culminated in that moment. He looked at me, practically pleading, but he didn't have to say a word, she said, smiling. I remained a silent listener, feeling that Jane needed a short pause to catch his breath before continuing. I didn't have to think twice. I knew I wanted to express my affection. We both wanted this moment when emotions could be shown so clearly and sincerely. His eyes, his breathing, all this was a signal to me that we were on the same wavelength, and it filled me with warmth. I felt like I wanted to do everything to make him happy in this moment, to make him feel how important he was to me. Jane breathed, her eyes full of memories and a small smile on her face. At this point, Mike came over to talk to us at exactly the wrong moment. "What are you talking about here?" he asked. Covering my excitement with my hand, I tried to act nonchalant. "She's just telling me some gossip." "About anything juicy?" he asked, if only he knew. But my wife quickly responded, "Plain Mike, you know what he's like." Mike seemed about to respond when someone shouted that it was his shot, so he turned around. "Good point," I joked as Mike walked away. "Did you say?" "Where was I?" she joked. I looked at her and she continued. Anyway, the combination of his pent-up frustration and my amazing pleasure-giving skills. "Thank you very much." "He only lasted a few minutes," Jane admitted. A normal husband might have been put off by this comment, but it only turned me on even more. I finished my beer and quickly took another, trying not to give away my current state. Who knew that telling your wife about the pleasure she gave to someone else could be so good for the health of my heart? Jane poured herself another glass of wine before adding the rest of the details. I cleaned myself up before getting myself together. I checked to see if the coast was clear and saw Jenny walking down the hallway. I distracted her with questions about her laundry, which gave Jose some time to escape from the bathroom undetected. Jane finished. "You guys went a little overboard," I said. "Yeah, this party is fun, but maybe a little too risky," Jane agreed. "But there is something about danger that makes me act." She quickly countered her own argument. "Still, you shouldn't get caught," I tried to object. She looked at me saying she didn't agree, so who am I to argue? To further boost her self-esteem, I decided to tell her about her admirer. "Met Mullins's son has been following you all night." "What, David?" she said incredulously. "Yeah, I think the boy liked your breasts," I added. You seemed to consider the consequences for a moment before commenting. That would be completely prohibited, forgetting about the age difference. "I agree," I finished. "I just thought you should know." Jane seemed lost in thought at this point, so I decided to stand up. I need to go to the bathroom myself. I'm sick of making me laugh that people are using the room you just pleasured Jose in. I asked, getting up from my chair. I just nodded and left the room. I was going to jerk off, but since she put it so nicely. Returning from the bathroom, I saw Jose in the kitchen getting food. He was alone, so I decided now was the time to make sure everything was okay. "Are you feeling better?" I asked, grabbing the plate. He raised his head to answer and then saw that it was me and seemed taken aback, speechless. "It's okay, Jose. Jane just told me the basics." I tried to reassure him as I grabbed the burger off the plate. Yet from what she said, she got the pleasure she needed today. I looked at him calmly. The look on his face was priceless, a combination of shock and surprise. "Jose, she tells me everything, so don't worry. The more she tells me, the better. Honestly, it makes it all work." I tried again to calm him down. I wanted him to know that I was really comfortable with the situation, but I guess I also wanted to assert my control over things no matter what it took. "As long as you respect her and respect our relationship, we'll be fine. No secrets. If it ever comes to that, we will have to call it all off," I stated clearly. He seemed to understand and nodded his head, scooping some potato salad onto his plate. "I understand," he agreed. "I can get carried away sometimes, but I don't need to tell you she's amazing." "Honestly, it's not a problem, Jose. Just remember that she likes to chase, so chasing her all the time won't help her." I wouldn't worry about it. I grabbed a couple of sides. "Okay, Brad, thanks." He took the plate and headed back into the room with me following behind him. I saw that Jane was back with the ladies, so I sat at the bar and had a bite to eat. Another beer and some food helped ease the tension, and I was able to take part in the next game of pool. Jose and Jane kept coming back to each other during the game, and they both seemed natural, so that was good. They didn't try anything explicit for the rest of the evening. After a couple of hours, the party started to leave, so we all helped clean up and said our goodbyes. Jose kissed Jane on the cheek and smiled at her. I shook his hand, the hand that touched my wife's breast, and we said goodnight. True to my wife's words, she pleased me on the way home. Overall, I can say that the day was a success. It turned out that during one of the conversations, Jane decided that I would not be there on Tuesday and that Jose should take advantage of the moment. The big day was set, only 3 days left. The next 3 days passed relatively calmly. I once attacked my wife in the shower, because that's the kind of guy I am. I don't want to be selfish about things like this, and I really enjoy giving her pleasure. During these 3 days, Jane and Jose communicated several times to conclude the meeting and express their wishes. Jose was open about what he wanted to do with my wife, and she showed me some of his most powerful texts. Their interactions irritated and annoyed Jane, and that was the whole point. I loved the effect it had on her. She wanted to jump on me several times, but I held her back, wanting her tension to build, so on Tuesday she was hungry. As the hour approached on Tuesday, I watched my wife get ready. I was so turned on by how sexy she looked. Jane sat near her dressing table, naked except for a pair of black stockings held up with a garter belt. She wore black, take-me heels that clicked on the floor as she walked. She planned to wear a tight black dress with spaghetti straps and no bra or underwear. What's the point, she told me. She wasn't going to get dressed for very long. Judging by the way Jose acted in his messages, she didn't think he'd be able to go long after the small talk. When she finally put the dress on, it hugged her body and chest, and it was very obvious that she wasn't wearing a bra. When she walked, her breasts naturally bounced and swayed, which I always found very sexy. My wife was hot. The moment finally arrived as my wife thundered down the stairs in heels, a half-drunk glass of wine in her hand. I was putting the finishing touches on my hideout, so everything was ready. Amazing, I told her as she reached the bottom of the stairs. James smiled at me and kissed me softly on the lips, my hand subconsciously finding her breast as I squeezed it tightly. He's on his way, so there's only a few minutes left, she said, breaking the kiss. Enjoy yourself, I said, heading towards the wardrobe. You know I will do it, especially knowing that you are watching me. Don't hurt yourself. She laughed as she went to check the room one last time. I went into the closet and sat down on a chair. I made sure the chair had robber's caps on it, so it wouldn't make a sound if I moved. I turned off the light and found myself in the dark. Through the cracked door, I could see the sofa. I was in the perfect place for what was about to happen. When the doorbell rang, I saw James get up from the couch and drink the rest of her glass of wine. Looking outside the door, she glanced in my direction, even though I knew she couldn't see me directly, and smiled mischievously. My wife headed to the door to let in the man who was about to have sex with her. Hi, I heard James' slightly muffled voice through the almost closed closet door. Hey, Jose replied, you look great. When the door closed behind them, I didn't hear if anything was said. A moment later, I realized why. When I heard wet kissing sounds and soft moans, they just jumped. I heard the sound of my wife's high heels approaching, so they headed back to the living room. A few seconds later, I saw James leading Jose by the hand to the sofa. Jose was wearing light black trousers and a polo shirt. When they plopped down on the couch, Jose was sitting facing me and James was to his left. The kissing immediately resumed, and I saw my wife clearly for the first time as I kissed another man sloppily. Their breathing became louder as they continued to kiss each other. Jose's hand gently touched the shoulder of my wife, whom I had previously caressed. He paused slightly as if trying to gauge her reaction, and then continued moving. I watched as he gently lifted the fabric of her dress, feeling her shoulder, his movements slow and deliberate as if he wanted to prolong this moment. My wife turned to give Jose better access and probably gave me a better view of what was going on. She knew that I was watching, and this added to her confidence. It was nice to know that she was thinking about me at that moment, sharing her tenderness between both of us. Jose slowly moved the strap of her dress, helping to free one shoulder and then the other. Jane calmly agreed, and let him do it as if enjoying his caring touches. The dress fell lower, exposing her shoulders, creating a feeling of lightness and openness. I noticed that she was smiling as they exchanged glances. Their views were full of mutual understanding and trust. Her head bowed, and she looked completely happy, as if at that moment all worries disappeared. Jose, carefully holding her waist, pulled her towards him, and they kissed passionately. Their kiss was deep and long. It felt tenderness and passion at the same time. I watched as their movements became more and more coordinated, as if they were communicating in their own language, without words, simply through touch and gestures. Their intimacy seemed natural and harmonious, as if they had known each other for a long time. Jane looked pleased and confident, her gestures smooth and gentle. She trusted him and opened up to him, just as she had once opened up to me. They continued to exchange tenderness, their faces glowing with sincere joy and passion, as if they had forgotten about everything else. Time seemed to slow down, and everything that was important was here and now in their touches, glances, and smiles. At some point, Jane carefully stopped Jose to take the initiative into her own hands. She pushed him back a little, sitting him down on the sofa, and gently leaned towards him, continuing the kiss again. This moment was filled with mutual trust and admiration for each other. I saw how they both enjoyed the moment, and this gave the whole thing a special charm. Their closeness was not only physical, but also emotional, and there was something very touching about it. All this time they maintained eye contact, showing each other their care and attention. There was something important and intimate in their gestures that went beyond just physical intimacy. It was a moment of complete mutual understanding and love, in which there was no place for haste and fuss. Their every gesture was filled with meaning, and it seemed that they wanted to remember every second of this evening. I enjoyed watching how my wife and Jose were engrossed in each other, and I felt happy for her. There was sincerity in their relationship, and I could see how she enjoyed every minute she spent with him. This moment was important and valuable for her, and I was happy for her, seeing her happy and satisfied. Perhaps this was what true love was all about, the ability to share happiness with those you care about and enjoy how they find their happiness. It's her turn. She made herself comfortable on the sofa, enjoying the atmosphere and the warmth of their mutual attention. Jose noticed this gesture, and as always, understood her without words. He sat down next to her, ready to share this precious moment with her. Jane carefully watched his movements. Her eyes were full of sincere admiration and understanding. Jose always knew how to catch her mood, and she felt it now when he focused on giving her attention and care. He touched her hand, a small gesture that conveyed support and reminded her that they were in this together. She placed her hand on the back of his head, not letting go, as if expressing gratitude for this warm connection. Jane closed her eyes, immersing herself in the atmosphere of calm that was between them. His every move was deliberate and confident, and she felt that he was finding the best ways to show her how important she was to him. At this moment, sitting on the sofa, she could completely relax and trust him. She took a deep breath, her body relaxing as Jose continued to be close to her, supporting her and giving all his tenderness. A feeling of peace washed over her, and she allowed herself to lose herself in the moment. Their mutual connection was obvious. She felt it in every touch and every look they exchanged. Her eyes met him for a moment, and she smiled, feeling that they understood each other without words. Jose continued to support her, and Jane felt a warm feeling of affection overwhelm her. He knelt next to her, his touch as soft and confident as ever. Time seemed to have stopped, and they were in some kind of their own world, cut off from the rest, immersed in this moment, which belonged only to the two of them. Jane bowed her head gratefully to his hand, showing that she was comfortable and ready to open up and trust. The moments between them became deeper, and their connection became stronger. Jose stood, and Jane seemed to be drowning in this feeling of support and tenderness. She knew she could count on him no matter what, and in that moment she felt safe, surrounded by his warmth and care. She placed her hand on his shoulder, and he responded with a small smile, which showed that he was happy to be there and share this moment. After a while, when they were tired, Jane finally raised her head and said, laughing, "Why don't we do this more often? Jose, smiling, replied, "You know why, Jane. Everything we do matters, but we must not forget about our past and the people who surround us." Jane nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude and understanding. "Yes, you're right, Jose. It's important to both of us. I'll always remember that, but I'm also grateful to you for always being there when I need support." Jose thought for a moment and then looked at her with a warm smile. "I'm glad to be with you, Jane, because our friendship is what makes us stronger." She responded with a smile, and they both sank into the moment, enjoying the silence and understanding that didn't require words. Jane leaned over and pressed herself lightly against Jose, feeling his warmth and care. They sat together, and it seemed that nothing else was needed. The moments they spent together were filled with peace and mutual respect, and that was what mattered most to both of them. Jane felt that moments like these made their bond stronger and more meaningful. They could just be together and enjoy each other's company, and that would be enough.